Chapter 21. Gaining talent over the years. Bai Lin raised his hands, but when Black's expression just relaxed a little, he quickly pulled out his wand and said to his wand, "Disarm you." Originally, the spell of this move was very long, but the Chinese was very short. While Blake was stunned, his wand was knocked away and fell into the firewood pile by the fireplace. Bai Lin spread his hands and said, "As you can see, I defeated you easily, but I still want to declare that I have no hostility towards you and Harry. I just want to completely wipe out Voldemort." Black looked at his hands, his face was terribly gloomy. He walked over to pick up his wand, and stuffed it into his arms. He had the pride of the Black family, and since Bai Lin showed mercy, he would not make a sneak attack. The last part of the original book mentions that the owner of the wand becomes the attacker after being hit by the disarming spell. The author of this article feels too far-fetched and does not plan to use it. Black sat opposite to Bai Lin, fixed his eyes on Bai Lin, but still picked up the black tea and took a sip, expressing that he was willing to talk. Bai Lin smiled and said, "Look, how nice this is, a conversation between two gentlemen." He paused and said, "Although I am an employee of the Ministry of Magic and a teacher at Hogwarts, my wish is different from that of you. Are very similar: get rid of Voldemort and his Death Eaters, and protect the good people around you. Although this is a very difficult task, someone must be willing to do it, don't you?" Blake obviously didn't believe Bai Lin so easily. He pondered for a moment and said, "I don't want to hear your sweet words, I just want to know, what do you want, and what can I get?" Bai Lin stared into his dark grey eyes and said, "I will try my best to make Harry recognize you and help you catch that mouse. Don't be surprised. I'm an expert on magical animals. I can see through animags at a glance. You can think of it as a gift I have acquired through years of research, just like the celestial eye of the Trelawney family." Black was obviously a little annoyed at being seen through at a glance, but he also accepted Bai Lin's explanation, because it was the only reasonable explanation. Bai Lin said, "I will bring Lupin here in the next 2 days. If you want to clear your name, you'd better convince him first. I think you already know about the mouse's movements through Crookshanks, and plan to sneak into Gryffindor. Do you have more dormitories?" Black didn't speak, and snorted through his nasal cavity. Anyone who was seen through would feel a little upset. Bai Lin said, "I didn't mean to stop you. In fact, that mouse has already taken precautions. You only made Gryffindor Castle turbulent in the past. Of course, it doesn't hurt. If you can't find the mouse, I will let Ron find the house elf in the castle for help, and with its location, I will tell you as soon as possible. You and Lupin come over to confront him, and everything will be revealed." After hearing this, Blake couldn't help feeling that his thoughts were really reckless. If any Hogwarts teacher saw him, he would inevitably be overwhelmed. After all, there are so many Dementors around, and the world the only person who killed the Dementor was sitting opposite him. But Black was obviously not convinced, and Bai Lin knew that he would not let it go until he tried it himself, shrugged and said, "If you insist, you can pay attention to a kid named Neville, who put this Gryffindor password. It's all written on a small note, you should be able to get it easily." Bai Lin paused and said, "Then, let's form an alliance." Black waved his hand and said, "I'm still saying the same thing, I have to know what you want. Don't use the grand ambition of destroying Voldemort to perfuse me." Bai Lin said, "Okay then, I'm going to hunt the Dementors, let them alone, and then kill them, which will give me magic power." Black stared at Bai Lin fiercely and said, "Are you an evil black magician too?" Bai Lin rolled his eyes and said, "I'm afraid you won't believe me, I'm still only good at spells at the 4th grade level, but I haven't touched the 3 major forbidden spells, and I don't want to kill anyone, whether it's muggles or wizards. Of course, it is also the responsibility of every employee of the Ministry of Magic to exterminate the Death Eaters, and this is not a violation of my original intention." Blake thought about it in his mind. At Hogwarts, there is a teacher with such powerful magic power as Bai Lin as an internal support. Of course, his actions are much more convenient. Finally, he sighed deeply, "I hope I won't regret my decision today. Okay, well, I agree to form an alliance with you in the name of the Black family." Bai Lin spread his hands and said, "Then there is no need to make it so formal. I believe you will do what you say. Eat something, I hope you can recover your fighting power as soon as possible." Said Bai Lin took out the fire that was hidden at the banquet yesterday: chicken and sausage, delicious mushroom soup and butterbeer. Blake had never enjoyed such good food while running for his life. Bai Lin came out of Hagrid's hut, looked at Buckbeak who was still grabbing a big stick with Fangya in the distance, shook his head, and decided not to change the plot, and let Malfoy ask for trouble. Back at Hogwarts, Lynn happened to meet the three distressed little ones, Hermione who had just been squeezed out by Trelawney who had no aura, Harry who was a little annoyed by the ominous omen, and who was trying to use divination, Ron bickering with Hermione. Harry obviously wanted to hear Lynn's opinion. Just before dinner, Lynn pretended to be inscrutable and started chatting with the three little ones. To be honest, this kind of chatting with the protagonist of the plot was really good. Good. Hermione sat next to Lynn intentionally or unintentionally, and opened up the conversation. Professor Carlin, Professor Trelawney wants to scare Harry with a scary omen, and Professor McGonagall just said that every year she will predict a student union in the face of misfortune. Please persuade Harry. I think Professor Trelawney is a charlatan. She said the last sentence in a very low voice. Ron was about to sneer, but Lynn said, "Do you know that if you make a ranking of the magic power of the wizards in Hogwarts, Professor Trelawney can firmly enter the top 10, even different from Professor Snape?" Comparable. Hermione obviously didn't believe it. "You mean what she said is true?" Lynn said, "That's not true. Trelawney is a family of prophets with a long history. There have been several prophets in history, and several famous and successful prophecies. There are only a few real predictions, other times, the celestial eye is closed. Let me tell you a story. Every Quidditch World Cup or Muggle World Football League has a traditional event of guessing the outcome and betting. Everyone can predict the outcome of the game. There are a large number of participants. Far exceeded the predictions for the election of the Prime Minister. There are many famous prophets, as well as ordinary wizards and ordinary muggles, but in the end, the chances of the prophets guessing right are almost the same as those of ordinary muggles. Learn black magic well. Defense and protection of magical beasts. Divination does require family inherited talents, and the future is fascinating because of the unknown." Chapter 22. Hippogriff. After lunch, the children happily came outside the castle. The rain had stopped and the sun was shining brightly. The green grass under their feet was still wet, and it was very elastic to step on. Because of a small disagreement in the divination class, Ron and Hermione were a little awkward, but when she thought of Lynn's class, ignoring Hagrid directly, Hermione was very nervous and kept asking Harry Lynn's question. The teaching style, is it strict and so on? But Harry is very relaxed. Hagrid and Lynn are both his good friends and the people he trusts the most, and he is very looking forward to what novel magic knowledge Lynn can teach him. But soon after they saw the eyesore, Malfoy with his dog legs, they realized that this lesson was going to be with the Slytherin students. Everyone walked down the grassy slope towards Hagrid's hut outside the Forbidden Forest. Hagrid and Lynn were waiting for the students at the door of the hut. Hagrid was wearing the moleskin coat, and Fang Fang the hound was standing at his feet, while Lynn was wearing a cocky hunting suit, looking heroic, but empty-handed. Nothing, but Harry knew that the teacher could turn into a ferocious white werewolf at any time. Hagrid glanced at Lynn. Lynn signaled that he was just an assistant. Hagrid cleared his throat, let the noisy students gather on the grass, first counted the number of people, and then led the students to a place at the edge of the forest. Outside the paddock, there was nothing in the paddock. Lynn yawned. He planned to find a shady place to sleep for a while, but found that many girls were staring at him. He smiled embarrassedly and listened patiently to Hagrid's introduction on how to use everyone's new class. Then touched the monster book of monsters, and turned to the page on the hippogriff. Lynn suddenly discovered that this book is quite interesting, and the introduction in it is slightly different from his own illustration book, so he immediately became interested. But Malfoy is obviously hostile to Hagrid, and he keeps sarcasm Hagrid, while Harry keeps telling him to shut up. After introducing the basic knowledge, Lynn saw Hagrid calling over a dozen animals. Most of the students had never seen such weird animals. They had the head of a giant eagle and the body of a horse, but their front legs and wings were still like those of an eagle. They looked a bit like griffins, with sharp beaks and claws that were quite scary, but they were all wrapped in leather collars and tied by long iron chains. It seemed that Hagrid didn't completely understand their dangerousness. Watching Hagrid introduce the hippogriff to everyone as if offering a treasure, and finally bring the most energetic Buckbeak forward. "Who is willing to try?" Hagrid said cheerfully. Lynn nodded encouragingly to Harry, and Harry stepped forward happily. The students behind were still marveling at Harry's ominous signs in the divination class, but after talking with Lynn, Harry didn't take it seriously at all. Harry looked at Buckbeak carefully, and then bowed his head. Here, Lynn couldn't help but want to complain, How could it be so troublesome? In the original book, the three little ones took Buckbeak away, and let Buckbeak take him when Black ran away. Didn't Black just step on it and fly away? However, the children still followed Hagrid's explanation, watched Harry approach step by step, first stroked Big Buck's mouth, then Big Buck closed his eyes lazily, dawdling for a long time before accepting it. Profit! Hagrid suddenly got excited, wanting to have a blast, and urged Harry to ride Big Buck, who spread his wings and flew high, causing another exclamation. Lin licked his lips. The hippodrome seemed pretty good to ride, and he was thinking of getting one after class. His custom-made firebolts hadn't arrived yet, and every time he rode Hagrid's old broom, he felt pain. Harry returned to the ground successfully. Lin gave Harry a thumbs up without hesitation, and Harry smiled all over his face. Hermione obviously noticed this, stepped forward and said, "Professor, can you let me try?" Hagrid was obviously a little surprised, but seeing Harry happily riding his eagle into the sky, many students were a little eager to try. Lin said, "Professor Hagrid, there are a lot of students today, why don't we guide a college by ourselves, so that every student has the opportunity to get in touch with the beautiful and proud eagle horse?" Hagrid immediately agreed, and patted Lin on the shoulder, as if you still understood me, and then Lin successfully led the Gryffindor children to the other side of the paddock. Hagrid, on the other hand, stayed where he was teaching the Slytherins. One by one, Lin unchained the 6 hawks that were assigned to him. Now that he has a magical creature affinity +4, these hawks that Hagrid had already tamed quickly obeyed Lin's words. Lin quickly took the 3 little ones and 2 braver Gryffindor students on the eagle horse, and they circled over the forest together. Harry said happily, "We should really organize a Quidditch match riding a hippogriff." Hermione was lying nervously on the back of a reddish-brown eagle horse, the mountain wind blowing her hair, and slowly she relaxed and enjoyed the joy of flying with her companions. But the good times didn't last long. Malfoy's piercing screams came from the ground, and then Hagrid rushed over and hugged Buckbeak, who was about to bite Malfoy. "Ah, that's too bad." Harry's heart twitched, and Lin hurriedly called the eagles and horses to land. Looking forward, there was a long and deep wound on Malfoy's arm, and blood was splashed on the grass. Malfoy yelled, "I'm going to die. It's going to kill me. I'm going to die." Lin rolled his eyes. A chubby student trotted over and handed a camera to Lin. Lin asked in a low voice, "Neville, did you take all the pictures?" Neville couldn't help nodding. Lin gave it a thumbs up and said, "I'll give you an A." Neville smiled when he heard that. He hasn't gotten an A in that class yet. The students talked a lot. Hagrid comforted Malfoy and hugged him. Lin stepped forward to open the gate of the paddock. Hagrid rushed up the hillside and ran towards the castle. The Slytherin students were all terrified and slowly gathered together, still complaining loudly to Hagrid. "It's all Malfoy's own fault. He provoked Big Buck." Dean was on the ground just now and had witnessed the whole process, so he couldn't help feeling sorry for Hagrid. The Slytherin students glared at the Gryffindor students one after another. Lin coughed and said, "Our class is called the Protection of Fantastic Beasts, and it teaches wizards how to protect animals, not how to teach animals how to protect animals. Surrender to wizards." I know some of you may be thinking the opposite, but since Professor Hagrid is busy, I'm going to do my homework today, just write about the difference between flying on a magical animal and flying on a broom. Come on, hee. Chapter 23. The Awe of Slytherin. "It's not fair, we haven't ridden a hawk yet," grumbled a Slytherin. Lin waved his hand and said, "I'm afraid I only care about the feelings of the students who are serious in class. Some people think that eagles and horses are dangerous enough. I can show you some less dangerous animals." The students immediately became interested. They were originally distracted by Malfoy's experience, but Lin's words drew them back. With a wave of Lin's hand, Xuefeng appeared on the grass out of nowhere, with a huge and majestic body, and the white wolf fur glistened in the sunlight. Wow! The students were taken aback by the huge white werewolf, or by Lin's summoning technique, but Sangxiao had only seen Xuefeng before, and immediately became happy. "In my years of research on magical animals, I have mastered a profound summoning technique. This is my summoned beast, the white werewolf Xuefeng, whose combat power is beyond the charts. As my assistant, he helped me kill countless demons and ghosts. Who would dare come up and try? Don't blame me for not giving you a chance," Lin said calmly. Harry was about to stand up, but this time Hermione took the lead and said, "I'm coming, I want to try, Mr. Carlin." Lin was taken aback. but he has always liked Hermione, a little girl who is smart, proud, and a little old-fashioned like a good student, but has always been kind and loyal, and her stunning appearance at the dance in the movie. Although Hermione and the actors in the movie are not the same person, but they have similar temperaments, and they are also beauties when they dress up. Bai Lin smiled and nodded. Hermione stepped forward timidly, but she didn't know how to communicate with Shuifeng. No one had ever tamed a beastly werewolf, and Shuifeng looked more like a Siberian wolf that had been magnified several times. Wolf or Samoyed? Hermione bowed nervously to Shuifeng, then stretched out her tender little hand, and stroked the long hair on Shuifeng's neck. Bai Lin waved his hand towards Shuifeng. Shuifeng prostrated himself on the ground and let Hermione ride on it. Hermione hugged Shuifeng's furry neck and laughed happily. Bai Lin said to the Slytherin students, "Look, a little girl can do it, and today's class is over. Gryffindor performed very well today, and I will add 50 points. Slytherin, the performance is mediocre. I am a little disappointed, but I think Malfoy has already paid the price, so I won't deduct points." A Slytherin student whispered, "You're just an assistant professor, you have no right to give Gryffindor points." Bai Lin smiled and said, "Actually, I have the right. You'd better pray that Professor Hagrid can teach you until the end of the grade, otherwise, if I were to take over as the official professor of this course, I'm afraid some people don't have respect and love for animals. Students, it will not be so easy to pass." As he said that, Bai Lin flashed his Ministry of Magic ID and said, "I heard that some students still want to enter the Ministry of Magic after graduation. I'm sorry, but every department there may have to give me some face, hee. Hermione, who had already got off Shuifeng's back and returned to the team, whispered to Harry and Ron, "Professor Kelling is trying to attract Slytherin's anger to him, lest more people complain about Hagrid." Harry looked at Bai Lin gratefully. Bai Lin tossed his hair chicly. It felt really good to pretend to be 13, and he also gained the admiration of the entire Gryffindor students and the awe of the Slytherin students. Why not do it woolen cloth? It wasn't until Thursday morning that Malfoy swaggered into the dungeon, when the Gryffindor and Slytherin students were halfway through their potions class. However, Malfoy's proud appearance with bandages on his arms did not attract the eager attention of the Slytherin students. Even Pansy Parkinson, who had been farting rainbow farts all the year round, did not flatter him, which surprised him a bit. "Sit down, sit down." Snape was as magnanimous as ever to the Slytherin students. "Today's lesson is about a new potion. Shrinking potion." As soon as Malfoy sat down, he started to do things. Relying on Snape's favor, he used Ron in various ways. Afterwards, Malfoy proudly confronted the three Zais. "I said, have you seen your friend Hagrid recently?" "Don't worry about it," Ron said angrily. "I'm afraid he can't be a teacher anymore," Malfoy said with a sad tone. "My father is very upset about my injury." Harry glanced at Malfoy's arm and said, "Professor Kellen said that if you fail to hand in the homework of the last class, you will fail. If I were you, I would worry about myself." Malfoy's eyes twitched, but he was still unconvinced and said, "My father will protest to the school board, to the Ministry of Magic, not only to Hagrid, but also to that poor assistant professor from the East. I will report to Azkaban." Harry didn't care. Bai Lin was omnipotent in his heart. How could he take Malfoy's threat to heart? "I will pass on your words to Professor Kellen. If your father drives Hagrid away, then he will our official professor." Malfoy's face was as ugly as if he had eaten a fly, and he forgot to keep calling Ron. On the other side, Snape was mocking, tossing, and running on Neville Longbottom as always. If Bai Lin was present, he would definitely remind him that in the original plot, Snape was finally eaten by the basilisk, and it was Neville who pulled out Gryffindor's Hege and avenged him. But at this moment, Neville might be bullied miserably in potions class, and 5 points will be deducted from Gryffindor by the way. Hermione was carrying a lot of books, and she was panting from moving around, which aroused the curiosity of Harry and Ron, but they were quickly attracted by new topics. Defense against magic class. If there are any basic skills for survival among the subjects taught at Hogwarts, it must be charms and defense against the dark arts. The boring charms class teaches everyone how to use difficult spells. Magic in the body, so as to become a real wizard, and the defense against the dark arts class is to teach you how to fight and practice fighting with dark wizards, fighting with dark creatures, and fighting with muggles with strange weapons in their hands. And the third grade is still learning to fight all kinds of strange dark creatures. Lupin was still wearing his old robes, but looked much better. Perhaps it was because it was the first time he was teaching, so he dressed a little more vigorously today, at least there were no stains on his robe, but his tattered box on the podium gave him a little more points. The students walked into the classroom one after another, habitually opening their textbooks. Lupin snapped his fingers and called everyone's attention back. Good afternoon, please put your textbooks back in your school bags. Today is a practical class. You just need to put on your wands. At this time, Bai Lin, who was holding a spell notebook, also came in, and said hello to Lu Ping. I want to sit in and study, I believe Professor Lu Ping will not mind. Lupin rolled his eyes. Do you still need to learn defense against the dark arts with your strength? However, he readily agreed. Chapter 24. Acting like a warrior. Lupin led everyone out of the classroom, around the corridor, and towards the staff lounge. At this moment, Peeves appeared. He ran up to Lupin's head and sang loudly, Lupin is crazy and stupid. Lu Ping hadn't said anything yet, but Bai Lin, who was walking at the end, was disturbed by the unpleasant singing. He waved his wand without raising his head, and suddenly a soap bubble appeared in the air, filling Peeves into it. Suddenly, Peeves became only the size of a fist, and his entire face was squeezed tightly against the inner wall of the soap bubble, and the soap bubble flew out of the window with Peeves, who was completely speechless. He can take some, thank you, Mr. Casey. Lupin shrugged. The three little ones looked at me and I looked at you. Harry shrugged at Hermione, implying that Bai Lin still had many strange spells that he didn't know about. Walking to the door of the staff lounge, Lupin looked down, and sure enough, he saw that Peeves had stuffed chewing gum into the keyhole, and taught everyone a practical little spell to pop the chewing gum out. Everyone happily walked to the staff lounge, but they happened to meet Snape with a poker face. Snape wanted to sneer at the Gryffindor students, but he saw someone walking behind the queue holding a note. Bai Lin, who was watching as he walked, swallowed his words. He had already learned about Bai Lin's attitude towards things, and knew that he was not easy to mess with, not to mention that Bai Lin's uncle was the current Minister of Magic. Fudge. Standing up for his nephew would still cause many obstacles to Snape's plan. In the end, Snape snorted coldly and walked out. Lupin watched Snape go away, and led everyone to the innermost row of wardrobes in the lounge. One of the wardrobes suddenly shook and bumped against the wall, which startled everyone. Lupin hurriedly reassured everyone, telling everyone that there was a boggart inside. This is their first lesson, facing their fears. First question, what is a boggart? Lupin asked. Hermione and Harry raised their hands at the same time. After special training, Harry studied these weird creatures hard. Lupin chose Hermione, and Hermione said, it's a shape-shifting thing, and it will turn into what you fear the most. Hermione was very happy to answer the question correctly in front of Bai Lin, but when she turned her head, Bai Lin he didn't seem to notice, just looked down at the book. Lupin was very satisfied, nodded, and said, I can't make it clearer myself, I will let him out later, he will become the first person he sees to be the most afraid, but now we have a huge advantage. Harry, do you know what it is? Harry hurriedly said, because there are so many of us, he can't judge what will become. Lupin clapped his hands and said, that's right. It's impossible for him to become two different things at the same time. For example, the upper body is a water monster, and the lower body is a fire dragon, isn't it? Then Lupin humorously taught everyone the special spell Funny Funny to deal with boggarts, and through his own willpower, he forced boggarts to become what he thought was the most ridiculous thing. After teaching the incantation, let everyone stand back and form a half circle far away, and each time a student will be selected to go forward to practice. Lupin knew that Neville was very depressed because of Snape's ridicule and bullying just this morning, so he chose him as the first student to try, and encouraged him again and again. In the end, Neville did not disappoint everyone and let boggart it turned into a Professor Snape wearing a green dress and holding a red handbag, which caused a roar of laughter. One by one, the boggarts turned into the things each student was most afraid of, sometimes into a big spider, and sometimes into a vampire. Just as he was about to turn his attention to Harry, Lupin stood in front of Harry, trying to stop him. Boggart. But Harry insisted on giving it a try. After the special training and the duel with the Dementors on the train, Harry felt that he was fearless. In front of T. The boggart began to change, gradually becoming a tall figure in a black robe and hood. Although the face cannot be seen clearly, everyone knows that this is the Dark Lord, that everyone is afraid of Voldemort. Not only Harry, but almost everyone, including Lupin himself, felt chills down their backs and broke out in cold sweat. Harry felt a sharp pain in his forehead, and he saw scene after scene of a woman, with a baby in her arms, begging a tall black figure not to kill her son, but to kill herself. Tears welled up in Harry's eyes, and the boggart turned Voldemort approached Harry step by step, but Harry didn't move. Lupin swallowed, and was about to go forward, but someone grabbed the corner of his clothes. Looking back, it was Bai Lin. At this time, he had put down his notes and picked up his wand. Harry can handle it, give him some confidence. Bai Lin raised his head at this moment and whispered. When Lupin was full of anxiety, Harry opened his eyes suddenly. In the shock of everyone, he did not shout a funny spell, but aimed at Voldemort's wand and said, "Disarm." After all, the boggart was just a low-level dark creature without Voldemort's magic power. The wand in his hand was instantly knocked into the air. Immediately afterwards, Harry's wand flew, and a series of boring and unreadable spells came out of his mouth one after another. The petrification curse, the shrinking curse, the stunning curse, the ice curse, were so fast that Lupin, who was stunned, had no time to react. Finally, Bai Lin's wand pointed at Harry and said, "The spell stops immediately." Harry was taken aback. The spell he was about to cast just now was stopped by Bai Lin, and the casting failed. Bai Lin said, "Wake up, he is not the real Voldemort, if you make another move, you will beat Boggart to death." Only then did everyone see clearly that Boggart was beaten all over his body and hid in the closet, never daring to come out again. The Gryffindor students looked at each other. No one expected such an ending, but everyone knew in their hearts that Harry was very strong, stronger than all of them, and maybe in the future it was really up to him to deal with Voldemort. Lupin suppressed the shock in his heart, and kept talking to calm everyone's spirits. Great! 5 points to Gryffindor, because everyone subdued the boggart, and to Neville, Hermione, and Harry. 5 points for Lee, you all completed the tasks in class very well. He paused, and said in a relaxed tone, everyone performed very well, as expected of Gryffindor students, courage is with everyone. As for homework, just read the chapter on boggart, it's simple, just write a little summary and experience, hand it in on Monday. After seeing off all the students, Lupin sat on a chair tiredly, and Bai Lin said, "What's the matter, Professor, you seem to be dissatisfied with Harry." Lupin rubbed his temples and said, "Not to Harry, I just want to ask you, what did you do to Harry? He is only a teenager, but he behaves like a soldier." Bai Lin looked at the blue sky outside the window and said, "I just gave Harry the chance to choose, whether to give himself a good childhood, or to face his fate and become a powerful wizard. You induced Harry." Lupin was very dissatisfied. Helping students become what they want to be, isn't that what our teachers should do? "Professor, Harry is destined to be extraordinary, and we cannot protect him forever. Maybe one day, we need his protection." Bai Lin rode. Lupin sighed, "I hope you're right, and I hope you're wrong." Chapter 25. Death Eater Antonin. The next month was uneventful. After passing the Hippogriff's first care of Fantastic Beasts class, Hagrid was devastated and only wanted to reduce the risk and use Flobber's green caterpillar to cope with teaching. But the brave student who didn't want to deal with the green caterpillar followed Bai Lin to wander around in the Forbidden Forest, catching wild boars, chasing leopard cats, looking for unicorns, and even taking advantage of Bai Lin's face to visit the horse people's village lap. If anyone is happier than Harry, it must be Hermione. She suddenly became very interested in the protection of Fantastic Beasts class, and her future aspirations began to approach an expert in the study of fantastic beasts. However, none of the students learned the art of summoning. It's strange if you can learn it well, but there is no doubt that the students who dare to challenge the unknown and the wild have greatly improved their survival ability and combat effectiveness, and they will no longer be easily frightened by creatures like werewolves. Originally, I thought that killing the Dementor on the train would have consequences, but then I only received a letter of accountability from Fudge, blaming Bai Lin for his recklessness, but he didn't even deduct his salary. Let Bai Lin guess right, the attitude of the Ministry of Magic is very entangled. He thinks that Bai Lin's behavior of killing Dementors at will should not be allowed, and he is happy that he can kill the Dementors completely, because even a member of the Ministry of Magic, and no one likes Dementors, and everyone who has seen them regards them as nightmares. In the end, because the Ministry of Magic didn't know how many Dementors there were, nor did they give them names, so who did Bai Lin kill? When it came to this matter, it was nothing. No one wanted to fight against Dementors and Fudge and the promising young wizard Kalin, let alone his mysterious and powerful family. It took Bai Lin 2 whole weeks to find the Hogwarts quartermaster Addison through the ghost of Hufflepuff College. The Fat Friar. A painting in the corridor in the back, a blacksmith hard at work. And Addison's function is also very simple: pay contribution points, customize equipment for any part of the body. Bai Lin knows that in addition to the magic wand, this world of wizards also has the concept of equipment, but just a belt with magic power plus 3 it takes 400 points, and the 200 points he just got are not enough. Bai Lin knew that he had to speed up his progress. He could no longer teach students in a safe and steady manner, and it was so leisurely to receive love letters from senior girls by the way, and the goal of his plan was to catch the cameraman Harry met during Quidditch training. A pack of spirits, he needs someone to show up in time to disperse the Dementors with a Patronus spell, and then he'll sit back and hunt the loners. There are also 2 Death Eaters as hunting targets. One is the Executioner McNeil sent by the Ministry of Magic to execute Buckbeak, and the other is Draco Malfoy's father Lucius Malfoy. Although this old man did not participate in the final battle, he has done a lot of bad things these years, and killing him is not wrong. Based on his memory, Bai Lin made a list of the Death Eaters he remembered. They were all murderers who committed all kinds of crimes, but in Bai Lin's eyes at this time, they were all shining Hogwarts contribution points. But the whole October was still very quiet. Harry started Quidditch training, but Bai Lin's firebolt still hadn't arrived, and it lasted until the eve of Halloween. Harry begged Professor McGonagall to let him go to Hogsmeade with Ron and Hermione, but he was ruthlessly rejected. Harry was comforted by his friends, but there was a bit of showing off in the comfort, which made him feel uncomfortable. Harry became even more depressed, but he couldn't find Bai Lin anywhere, and it was Lupin who comforted him in the end. As for Bai Lin, at the beginning of the month, when he went to the Hogsmeade tailor shop to pick up his custom-made winter clothes, the young and beautiful Miss Catherine confessed to him. Miss Catherine is a famous beauty in Hogsmeade, but she has a very high vision and a hot personality. There has never been a male wizard to get cheap from her, but every time Bai Lin makes an appointment, she will dress up carefully and put on a small dress made by herself. The focus is to highlight her hot figure and beautiful appearance. Personality: he also changed from a small Tyrannosaurus to Hello Kitty. It would be a lie to say that Bai Lin was not moved. Because of her heartbeat, Bai Lin has been customizing her own clothes in her shop. The styles are all designed by Miss Catherine herself. If you say that Miss Catherine's taste and magic skills are equally high, directly make Bai Lin's image color values are up 2 notches. Just like this, the two started a formal relationship. If you say that the love of wizards is pure and magical, the witch will not ask the wizard if he has a house in the school district in London, whether he has a company at home, and what kind of car it is. How much money is saved in the card. There is no dating project such as watching a movie, going to an amusement park, and eating a Michelin-starred restaurant. Maud's 3 broomsticks is all you need for a butterbeer. However, in the past few days, Bai Lin got a message from Catherine. A wizard with a long twisted face went to a clothing store to order a coat. The wizard's eyes were terrifying, which made Catherine feel violated. Based on his memories, Bai Lin knew the origin of the wizard. It was one of his Death Eaters, Antonin Dolohov, who came to Hogsmeade. This news awakened Bai Lin from the sweetness of his first love. Catherine was a little scared when she learned that Bai Lin was going to capture a Death Eater, but soon the fiery and decisive part of her character gained the upper hand. Instead, he helped Bai Lin formulate an assassination plan. Antonin was no ordinary person. In the final battle, he killed many members of the Order of the Phoenix, Hogwarts, and the Ministry of Magic, including Lupin and his wife. It can be said that he was full of evil. At this time, Antonin also eradicated many dissidents for Voldemort, or he enjoyed the feeling of killing very much. Halloween is coming, children may not feel it, they are all focused on fun places such as the Duke of Bees, Zonko Joke Shop, Magic Equipment Shop, etc., and they don't pay attention to Hogsmeade. There are many strange wizards coming, many of them came here for Sirius Black, or for a bonus of galleons, and Antonin was one of them. Bai Lin and Catherine found Antonin at the corner of the 3 Broomsticks bar. He ordered a plate of raw foie gras and was dipping it in blood. Catherine felt a little uncomfortable. The two of Bai Lin walked out of the bar, found a guy who was running errands, gave him a silver sickle, and asked him to bring a message to Ndong Ning. The coat he ordered at the tailor shop was finished, so he asked him to pick it up. Ambush in the alley next to the clothing store. After waiting for more than an hour, the sky was completely dark. Bai Lin almost gave up, and finally saw Antonin's figure. He seemed to have drunk a lot, but his hands were kept in his arms, holding his wand. Vigilant heart is quite high. As soon as he walked into the alley, Ndong Ning said to the darkness deep in the alley, "Come out, lead me here, I want to see what kind of daring character it is." Bai Lin was taken aback, he didn't expect Dong Ning to see through it so easily, and suddenly thought that he is a veteran villain, maybe he has used the same trick to deceive others. Chapter 26. Dangerous Black Magic. Bai Lin put his hands in his arms, held the wand inserted into the inner lining, and walked out from the dark place. Antonin obviously did not expect such a young wizard, probably only 20 years old. Antonin grinned and said, "You should come out with your wand, at least you can make a move or two with me, and I will greet you well." It was the first time Bai Lin faced the battle with the Death Eaters. He thought how difficult it could be, is it harder than facing a Dementor, but standing opposite Antonin, Bai Lin felt his murderous aura, felt the dark energy in Antonin that was not inferior to the Dementors at all. Bai Lin dared not underestimate him. Said, as expected of Antonin Dolahov, a dark wizard who hides deeply, Voldemort's lackey. Antonin frowned, as Bai Lin said, he usually hides very deeply, and has never let anyone see the dark mark on his left arm, but now that Bai Lin said it out, he was a little ashamed and said angrily, "Then there is no reason to let you go." Antonin pulled out his wand and pointed at Bai Lin, but Bai Lin was one step ahead of him, pointing at his wand and shouting, "Disarm." I thought that Antonin's wand would be knocked into the air, but Bai Lin obviously underestimated Antonin's strength, or his vigilance. Looking carefully, he actually tied his wand to his arm with a cowhide strap. With a shake of his arm, Antonin grabbed the wand again, and said to Bai Lin, "Avada Kedavra." The hairs all over Bai Lin's body stood on end immediately, and he clearly felt a blue-green gloomy energy emanating from Antonin's body, which was condensed into a bolt of lightning through the wand and aimed at him. The legendary curse that no one can escape, except for Harry Potter. Just breathing into his own face, the chill and fear of death were even stronger than the feeling of facing a Dementor. Summon the Mandrake. Bai Lin couldn't think of any skills that could resist the Avada Kedavra, and in desperation, he summoned the Mandrake. More than a dozen Mandrakes appeared out of nowhere and blocked Bai Lin's body, but before they could scream, they were hit by the energy of the Avada Kedavra and instantly turned into fly ash. Bai Lin didn't dare to delay, he dived into the darkness next to him. For a powerful Death Eater like Antonin, using the 3 forbidden spells was as easy as eating and drinking. If he missed a hit, he would immediately make up for it. Bai Lin Na dared to be his living target in the open again. Antonin smiled strangely and followed closely, but when he followed Bai Lin into the dark, what he met was a huge white wolf. Antonin's skills are far superior to ordinary wizards who are weak in body. He dodged sideways, dodged Xuefeng's pounce, and turned around with a cruciatus curse. He fell to the ground and was almost instantly killed. Bai Lin made a move from far away, all petrification. But this time tested move against dark creatures in the wild, Antonin completely ignored it, and he said with a smile, "I have received the blessing of the holy snake Nagini, so don't think about your crappy low-level spells. Hurt me." Catherine, who was hiding aside, couldn't bear it any longer, rushed out of the darkness, and made a move to Antonin, Opagno. Thousands of bullets fired. Suddenly, hundreds of birds of various colors appeared in the sky, some sparrows, skylarks, and crows rushed towards Antonin like magic bullets. Antonin was immediately surrounded by noisy birds, and he was in a hurry. This spell, which is completely ineffective against many dark creatures, works very well against human wizards. Catherine pursued the victory, aimed at Antonin's wrist, and shouted, "Sectum Upura." It can't be published through the thesis, and many wizards have learned it. In fact, it is a wind blade. Although it is black magic, it is not included in the forbidden spell. Antonin didn't notice, barely avoiding the invisible blade and cutting off his right hand directly, but the blade still cut off the leather belt on his wrist. Bai Lin didn't delay and had already drawn out his long sword, aimed at Antonin's right hand and shouted, "Disarm you." Antonin's wand was finally knocked into the air, but Antonin also took the opportunity to roll on the spot to get rid of the bird's attack. The effect of all bullets could only last for a few seconds, and the birds also scattered and disappeared. Bai Lin looked at the wand that was knocked into the air, but Antonin still took out another wand from his bosom, pointed at Catherine and yelled, "Avada." Bai Lin was so frightened that he was about to burst into tears, and threw the long sword in his hand desperately. At the critical moment, the long sword pierced Antonin's chest. Before he finished reading the Avada Kedavra, Antonin spat out a mouthful of blood. In front of him, wanting to say something, Catherine pointed at his mouth and shouted, "Saransayo." Soundless and silent. An invisible force sealed Antonin's mouth, preventing him from uttering another word. The Death Eaters were really too dangerous. Bai Lin rushed forward, grabbed Sheba's sword hilt, and twisted it, Antoning finally died so badly that he couldn't die anymore. In front of Bai Lin, he got a prompt from the illustrated book system. Successfully completed the first Death Eater kill, Hogwarts contribution plus 200, current contribution is 400. After that, every time you kill a Dementor or a Death Eater, you will be rewarded with 100 contribution points. Bai Lin sat on the ground panting, and met Catherine's eyes. He thought that the hunt was a sure thing, but he was almost wiped out when he was forced. Catherine even walked through the gate of hell, and the two of them were a little behind by a second, and it might have been a different ending. When I used to read books, I always thought that the wizarding world was very low. This is a killing curse, just treat it as a pistol, and if you hit it, you will die, but when you face it, Bai Lin realizes that this is not the case at all. First of all, as long as the bullet does not hit the vital point, there is still a great possibility of survival, but even if the death curse hits the finger, it will cause a painful death. Secondly, the bullet has a way of defense, you can wear a helmet and body armor, but simply the killing curse is almost impossible to defend against, except for Harry, who has the aura of the protagonist. The eyes of the third wizard have the ability to track and lock, which means that all Death Eaters are sharpshooters, and the chance of avoiding the killing curse by dodging is very low. To sum up the above 3 points, it is doomed that in this magical world, the power of black magic that makes everyone terrified is so terrifying. The Cruciatus curse almost tortured Swifeng to death, and no matter whether it was the healing curse, the recovery curse, or the primary healing spell, it was ineffective against the Cruciatus curse. In the end, Bai Lin had to take Swifeng back into the system. At this time, the back of the illustration showed, Summon Beast, White Werewolf Swifeng, Level 3, it seems that as a summoned beast, Swifeng also needs 3 hours to eliminate the influence of the Cruciatus curse. Chapter 27 Loyalty Trial. Bai Lin exposed Antoning's left arm, took a few photos of his body, and then quickly left the scene with Catherine. Soon passers-by found Antoning's body and reported it to the Aura office. Although he clearly knew that the other party was a Death Eater who did all kinds of evil, but this was Bai Lin's first time to kill someone, and it would be a lie to say that he was not afraid. Just before this, Bai Lin still felt that the wizard's world was illusory, just like the world in his dream, and it was an immersive game, but in the real battle, he personally experienced the horror of the edge of life and death, inserting a long sword into a person's chest, watching Antonin's blood donation gushing out of his chest and mouth, and listening to the gurgling sound in his throat before he died, Bai Lin felt very guilty about killing. Not good. Catherine had lingering fears, and the two entered the closed clothing store. Catherine hugged Bai Lin, buried her head in Bai Lin's arms, and said after a long time, although he is a bad guy, I don't feel very good. Bai Lin sighed and said, if he hadn't used the death curse first, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to do it either. Catherine said, Death Eaters are scary. I don't know why you take the risk to deal with them, but the two of us are still a little weaker. Bai Lin patted Catherine on the back, comforted her for a long time, and decided to tell her his plan, saying, I have a talent, I can gain strength by killing black wizards or dementors, today is also the first time use this talent. Catherine was taken aback. It was the first time she heard about this incredible talent. Honey, you won't become a dark wizard too? Bai Lin shook his head like a rattle and said, absolutely not, I will neither use the unforgivable spell nor bow to the power of the mysterious man. Catherine hugged Bai Lin tightly, and the two kissed each other unconsciously. Both Bai Lin and Catherine were first-timers in love, and they sucked each other's lips strangely. The two kissed for nearly 10 minutes. Catherine's eyes were a little blurred, but she seemed to have made a big decision. No matter what you want to do, I will support you. Although Catherine is just a woman who runs a clothing store tailor, but all the residents of Hogsmeade are wizards. Catherine graduated from the Bosbaton School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, which is as famous as Hogwarts. She also has 46 points of magic power and is a powerful witch. It took Bai Lin a lot of effort to explain to Catherine the truth about Sirius Black and his alliance with him. Bai Lin thought twice and said, maybe I need to let Harry and Black recognize each other in advance. I need Black and Lupin to help me disperse the Dementors and kill the single ones. I don't think Antonin came to Hogsmeade. Coincidentally, there are likely to be other Death Eaters coming to Hogwarts. Catherine was very nervous, but in Bai Lin's arms, she was full of worry. Bai Lin carefully recalled the relevant plots and said, in the original plot, when Dumbledore was still alive, Voldemort who had not recovered his strength would not dare to attack Hogwarts, and the Death Eaters had no reason to chase and kill Black. Black is not a member of the Order of the Phoenix at this time. Bai Lin thought for a while and said, could it be a Death Eater who hates Black very much? I remember that Black's cousin is a Death Eater. You mean Bellatrix Lestrange? Catherine suddenly realized, I've heard of that witch. She's the leader of a group of Death Eaters. She's so bad. I heard she killed her. A good man can fill a whole page. Bai Lin glanced at the main task information on the illustration book. Main task, the first stage of the defense of Hogwarts, the trial of courage, completed. Main task, the second stage of the defense of Hogwarts, the trial of loyalty, in progress. Trial of loyalty, Blake, who has been wronged for 12 years, has the greatest wish to recognize Harry Potter and his son, help him reveal the truth of the year, and let Peter Pettigrew get the punishment he deserves. In the original plot, it was almost New Year's before Harry and Black revealed the truth in the screaming haunted house in Hogsmeade. In the end, Black was forced to flee. Bai Lin could not wait that long, because his appearance seemed to make the whole situation happen. Some unknown changes. Bai Lin said, consuming this way, it is very likely that Bella sent Death Eaters to get rid of Black. There are still a large number of Dementors in Hogwarts. They used to be allies of the Dark Lord. I have to be careful, I have a plan and I need a few helpers, first solve the problem of the Dementors, and then I can concentrate on dealing with the attacks of the Death Eaters. Catherine said with a resolute expression, the Dementors are scary, you must be careful, my dear, I will check for you in Hogsmeade. Bai Lin reassures Catherine, and decides to let Harry and Black recognize each other in advance, first of all, to catch Peter Pettigrew. Bai Lin made up his mind and rushed to Gryffindor Castle non-stop. Today, whether they persuade Ron or directly grab him, they will catch Banban. But when they arrived at Gryffindor Castle, it was full of people, and the students were panicked and noisy. Bai Lin found a student randomly, and after asking, he found out that the plot of the Fat Lady's escape in the original plot still happened. The painting where it was torn open, leaving a few paw prints. It seems that Black couldn't wait any longer, and he and Crookshanks came to catch Scabbers. The students all believed that Black had come to assassinate Harry, and the whole Hogwarts was in a panic. It was not until Dumbledore personally came out that he stabilized everyone's emotions, and let the prefects of all grades take the students back to their dormitories rest, and then ask all teachers to form a search team to search the entire Hogwarts overnight. The students started to move in a mess, and Professor McGonagall was blocking the entrance of the Gryffindor dormitory. Bai Lin couldn't enter the Gryffindor castle now, and he didn't see Harry and Ron at a glance. At this time Lupin, belonging to Gryffindor College, passed by. Bai Lin grabbed him and asked him to help find Ron and bring Ron's mouse over. Liu Ping didn't believe it at first, he always thought that Peter was dead, until Bai Lin described Banban's appearance. Liu Ping fell silent and agreed to help him find the mouse. In fact, Lupin should have seen Ron's mouse on the train. It is impossible for him not to recognize that this is the animagus of his good brother Peter Pettigrew. It's just that there is a small bug in the original plot here. Hearing Filch curse Black fiercely, he summoned the teachers present and arranged search and patrol missions for everyone. Bai Lin was very reluctant to accept the task of searching the entire 4th floor, but just as he was about to go on patrol, he turned around and found an unexpected harvest. In the crowd, Ron's brother, one of the living treasure twins Fred, was carrying an old backpack, chatting and laughing with a few classmates in the crowd. It seemed that he was not nervous about Blake's matter at all, but Bai Lin was in the exposed corner of the backpack and saw a rolled up old parchment. Bai Lin secretly smiled in his heart, walked over calmly, grabbed Fred by his arms, and pulled him into the empty stairwell. Chapter 28. Fred was a little nervous. Although he was fearless, he was still a half-grown child after all. After seeing Bai Lin's methods, he didn't dare to fight against him. Take it out, what you stole from Filch's office. Bai Lin stretched out his hand. Fred was a little flustered, and said with erratic eyes, I don't understand what you are talking about. Professor. Bai Lin pointed to the parchment in his backpack and said, anyway, you memorized those secret passages, leave them to me, I need them to strengthen the defense of Hogwarts. Bai Lin said righteously. This parchment is not simple. It is a bug Hogwarts map drawn by the Predator team back then. Through the map, everyone in the school can be tracked, which is equivalent to implanting GPS positioning. Can also display the original name of the shapeshifter. In the original book, Filch seized this map from someone who didn't know, but he couldn't use it at all, so he stuffed it into a drawer in the office, and it was later stolen by Fred. Come out. Fred took the Marauder's map and mainly used the secret passage inside to sneak out to play. Later, at Christmas, he gave it to Harry as a Christmas present. In fact, there are many bugs in the original plot here. For example, since he can see the original name of the person, how could Fred sit and watch Peter turn into a mouse and stay with his own brother all the time, and why didn't such a good thing be given to Ron? Instead, he inexplicably took the initiative to give it to Harry and so on. In this original plot, Fred is completely a tool man. Fred knew very well that if Bylin attacked directly, he would not be an opponent at all, and he would be severely punished by Filch afterwards. When he heard Bylin say that he would strengthen the defense of Hogwarts, he thought of the fat lady just now. Incident, obediently handed the parchment to Bylin. Professor, this spell is... Bylin waved his hand and said, I know, if it wasn't for an emergency, I wouldn't ask for the students' things. Okay, you can go back and take care of those boys. After successfully obtaining the Marauder's map, Bylin found a place where no one was around, and said directly to the blank parchment, I solemnly swear that I will do no good. Sure enough, handwriting began to appear on the white paper, a very detailed the Hogwarts map was displayed in front of Bylin. After a while Liu Ping came out, shook his head to Bylin and said, the mouse has escaped. Bylin raised the map in his hand, and said with a chuckle, I can't run away, I have this. Liu Ping was taken aback, but soon recognized that it was the Marauder's map made by the Troublesome Four. Sure enough, the two pretended to be patrolling around, and wandered to the kitchen door as if nothing had happened, because Peter's name appeared here. Bylin held a thick glass jar in his hand, and opened a wine barrel at the door of the kitchen with one hand. Suddenly, a grey-white mouse with a lot of hair loss and one finger missing appeared in front of the two of them. Lupin was obviously a little surprised. But the movement was still fast. Without saying a word, he knocked the mouse unconscious with one move. Peter in the mouse state couldn't cast spells, so Bylin threw it into a glass jar and made two small holes in the lid to avoid suffocating it directly. In this way, even if Peter wakes up, he will not be able to appear in such a small space. If he is forced to appear, he will swell to a size slightly larger than the glass jar, but not enough to break the glass jar, and his bones will be crushed by the pressure. Everything was ready, but Lupin hurried back to Gryffindor Castle anxiously, trying to find a way to bring Harry out. In the middle of the night, Lupin sneaked out Harry, and teachers were patrolling the floors, and the gate of the college was even more guarded. The three of them met at the statue of Gregory according to the Marauder's map, passed through the secret passage, and past the gate of the castle guarded by the Dementors, and rushed to Hagrid's hut without stopping. Seeing Bylin and the others bring Harry, the big black dog lying at the door of Hagrid's cabin shuddered and stood up. At this moment, Hagrid was volunteering to patrol around the outside of the castle with Yaya. He thought that if he worked harder, Buckbeak would be given a lighter punishment. Bylin directly opened the door, letting everyone and the big black dog enter in the room. Bylin made everyone form a circle, and put the glass jar in his pocket on the only small round table in the room. Scattered? You found it? Harry said in surprise. Ron searched for it all night, and even had a fight with Hermione over it. Bylin waved his hand and said, what we are going to solve tonight is not about two children arguing. Harry, maybe you should take a deep breath, the next few words may be difficult for you to accept. Lupin stared at Bylin with gloomy eyes. He recognized the big black dog the first time he saw it, but he was still struggling in his heart. After all, both Peter and Black were his brothers. Bylin cleared his throat and said, I'll try to keep it brief. More than 10 years ago, there were 4 students at Hogwarts. They were like mischievous, and they established a special prank group called Predators. One of them was called James Potter. Yes, Harry, your father. Harry's eyes lit up, listening intently. These 4 good brothers are brothers and sisters, but when Voldemort rose, one of them was afraid of Voldemort's deterrence, betrayed the other brothers, and indirectly killed Harry's parents. Sirius Black. It's him. Harry said through gritted teeth. The big black dog's expression darkened. No, Harry, the traitor is someone else. Bylin pointed to the mouse in the jar and said, it's him, Peter Pettigrew. The comatose mouse in the jar suddenly woke up, jumping desperately in the jar. The big black dog pounced on the table, held down the jar, and looked at the mouse inside viciously, eyes full of hatred. Harry was stunned by Bylin's words, and Lupin was also stunned. He thought that Black might have been framed and arrested unjustly, but he didn't expect Peter Pettigrew to be the traitor. Bylin told Harry's father that the secret agent of the Fidelity Curse was changed from Black to Peter. Lupin suddenly realized, but Harry still couldn't believe it. Bai Lin said, all the parties involved are here now, Blake, you can manifest now, you have to confront Peter in front of Harry. The big black dog roared angrily, and his whole body changed drastically. After a while, it had turned into Black's appearance. Harry was startled and pulled out his wand. Harry, believe me. Bai Lin said to Harry. Harry swallowed and did not attack Black. Blake looked tired, but he was happy to let go of his burden. He pointed to the mouse and said, Kellen is right, although I don't know how he understands the truth, but he is right, how could I hurt me? Brother, James, I'd rather die than hurt him, and you, Harry, I was your father's best man when he married, and, besides, James made me your godfather. Harry suddenly remembered the only photo of his parents when they were married. There was a handsome young man standing beside his father with a smile. It turned out that it was Black. Bai Lin felt a little inexplicably irritated, thinking that in the original plot, when the truth came out, Snape broken and messed up. Leave the confrontation to yourselves. I'm going out to find out. Bai Lin stood up and walked out. He always felt that something was about to happen. The sound of glass jars breaking quickly came to mind in the room. Bai Lin drew out his wand, heightened his vigilance, raised his eyes, saw a small hill beside him, and quickly climbed up. Chapter 29. The Wizard of Infernal Affairs. Bai Lin, who had just climbed the hill, saw two wizards coming from the direction of Hogsmeade on brooms at high speed. Seeing someone on the hill, the two wizards lowered their brooms and landed. Bai Lin saw how they were dressed. Both of them were wearing Auror standard robes, one of them squinted his eyes, and the other had a shallow scar on his face, which cut off his beard. The small eyes took a closer look, and in the moonlight, they recognized Bai Lin and said, You are, Mr. Kylan? Why are you here so late? Bai Lin looked in the direction of Hogsmeade from the corner of his eye, but there were no other wizards, and said, Are you here for Antonin? Scar's face suddenly became serious. He pulled out his wand and said, I'm afraid we have to ask you to go back to the Ministry of Magic, sir, please don't resist. Bai Lin chuckled and said, I'm afraid I can't make you wish, gentlemen, I have to inform Principal Dumbledore. The little eyes were startled when they heard Dumbledore's name, and their eyes widened a lot. At this moment, two more figures flew over on a broom from the direction of Hogwarts. Bai Lin from afar could see that one of them was Snape with a poker face, and Bai Lin frowned immediately. The other was also wearing Auror robes and had a red onion nose. Snape always took the lead. Kellen White, you'd better explain why you appeared outside the castle. He pointed his wand at Bai Lin intentionally or unintentionally, but looked at the scarred face and small eyes with a little twinkle in his eyes. Bai Lin squinted his eyes. He saw something strange in Snape's eyes, and suddenly understood that he knew these two wizards in Auror uniforms. At this time Snape was a two-way spy. If he knew Scarface and Small Eyes, then these two people were probably Death Eaters. The three parties confronted each other, and Bai Lin was about to speak, but there was a scream in Hagrid's hut. Bai Lin thought, it's too bad, it must be Harry's kindness that decided not to kill Peter, and Peter turned into a mouse and escaped while the three were not paying attention. Sure enough, Hagrid's door was knocked open, and Black rushed out first, just in time to be watched by the three Aurors and Snape. Expelliarmus. Bai Lin aimed at the Small Eyes with a move, and then directed at Snape with a move of fainting. The spell was cast as fast as thunder. As soon as the attention of the Small Eyes was attracted by Black, he was hit immediately, and the wand in his hand flew out, but Snape had been on guard for a long time, turned over from the broom, and was very agile. The onion-nosed Auror had a lazy look on his face just now, but at this moment he was already full of energy, and aimed at Bai Lin with a move, Disarm you. He removed. Bai Lin inserted the wand back into his arms immediately after casting the spell, and retreated towards the hut. Scarface yelled, and directly directed at Black, Crucio, Crucio curse. It's not that many Death Eaters are merciful and won't kill people directly, but the incantation of the Cruciatus curse is very short. It is easy to read when fighting, and the effect is extremely cruel. Lupin, who was following Black, pushed Black away, and was hit by the Cruciatus curse instead of him, and fell to the ground with a scream. You're all in one! Snape screamed. Bai Lin knew that no one would listen to his explanation at this time, so he quickly summoned Swifeng and rushed towards Snape. Except for Aurors, other people cannot legally use the 3 forbidden spells. This can be seen from the Goblet of Fire. It can be seen in which episode Mad-Eye Moody showed the 3 forbidden spells in class, so Snape couldn't subdue Swafang for a while. Bai Lin said to Black, "Go after Peter." Then he said, all petrified. Black roared, turning into a big dog and galloping away following Peter's scent. However, Bai Lin's petrification curse failed again, and his scar face did not respond. Bai Lin remembered the blessing of the basilisk Antoning said, and immediately cursed himself as an idiot. Onion Nose jumped off the broom, hid behind a rock on the hillside, and cast a stunning curse at Bai Lin from a distance, but he didn't do anything cruel, probably not a Death Eater, but arrived at Hogwarts because of the Fat Lady incident Aurors. Bai Lin quickly pulled out his wand, and shouted Impedimenta, there are many obstacles, towards the dirt slope in front of him, and suddenly a dirt wall rose on the ground in front of him, blocking the stun spell. Lupin rolled all over the floor in pain. Harry behind him was terrified, and didn't know what happened, but then, the painful Lupin began to change, with white hair growing all over his body, his eyes became red, and his face became more and more serious. Long nails grow on the fingers. Harry, be careful, Lupin is going to turn into a werewolf. Bai Lin shouted to Harry with his back against the dirt wall. Harry received too much incredible information that night. First, Blake, who he thought was his life and death enemy who killed his parents, turned out to be his godfather who had been wronged for 12 years, he is a traitor who betrayed his parents. Lupin, who thought he was just teaching him defense against the dark arts, turned out to be a dark and cruel werewolf. But the special training during the summer vacation had an effect at this time. Harry didn't stay at a loss for too long, but retreated to Hagrid's hut and pulled out his wand. Behind the rising earth wall, Bai Lin called out in the direction of Onion Nose, Mr. Big Nose, do you know those two Aurors? They are probably Death Eaters. Onion Nose was stunned behind the stone. Things happened too quickly. When he thought about it, he had never seen the two wizards in Auror uniforms opposite him. Moreover, they yelled the forbidden curse just after they met. Although they were facing the fugitive Black, it was not in line with Auror's relevant law enforcement procedures. Snape hid next to Onion Nose, his eyes were erratic, he didn't know whether to help Scarface bring Onion Nose down, or help Onion Nose deal with Scarface. At this time, Little Eyes had already picked up the wand, stepped forward to point at Bai Lin's earthen wall and shouted, Red Ketau! Bones to pieces! There was a loud noise, and the earth wall exploded violently as if it had been hit by a grenade. Bai Lin protected his head and rolled to the side during the explosion, his heart aroused a bit of anger. Although he didn't want to use the forbidden spell lightly, especially since he couldn't confirm that the other party was a fake Auror, but taking advantage of the huge dust generated by the earth wall explosion, pointing at the room with small eyes, he said, Shen Feng Wuying. A wind blade slashed towards Xiao Yan's body, and Xiao Yan hurriedly cast a protective spell on himself, but Bai Lin cast the spell much faster than him, and immediately after that, fire is raging. Fiery raging. Immediately, two fireballs flew from the left and right sides Xiang Xiao Yan. Xiao Yan rolled on the spot, but was still wiped on his robe by a fireball. Awada! Scar took a few steps forward, aiming at Bai Lin in the dust, directly casting the killing curse. Disarm! Another spell hit his wrist before he could finish the killing spell, but the onion-nosed Auror leaned out from behind the stone and cast a spell on him. Chapter 30. Chasing Peter Pettigrew. Snape chose to help no one in the end, didn't attack Onion Nose, and didn't come out to help them deal with Scarface. The Little Eyes on the ground saw that his robe was on fire, so he quickly gave himself a trick. Agu amenti, clear water is like a spring, suddenly appeared out of thin air a big water ball, drenched his body completely, and extinguished the flames. However, Bai Lin's flying ice arrow immediately hit him as soon as he was wet, and his drenched eyes were frozen into ice sculptures. Kropatos! Confinement curse, Bai Lin shouted to Scarface, whose wand was knocked into the air in his hand. Scarface immediately had his hands imprisoned behind his back by the magic spell, and Bai Lin immediately sealed his mouth. Harry! Bai Lin shouted, quickly ran down the dirt slope, and rushed into Hagrid's hut. Hagrid's hut was already in a mess, but Harry was still standing. Although his robes had been scratched a lot, and there was still blood oozing from his shoulders, it was not a serious problem in general, and Lupin turned grey and white. The werewolf, however, had already collapsed by the fireplace, his two forelimbs were locked together, and his two maces were like two huge sticks, stretching his mouth wide open, and he had already passed out at this moment. Breathing heavily, Harry said to Bai Lin, Professor, I won. Bai Lin couldn't help smiling at him. The system prompt in front of me, subdue 2 Death Eaters, Hogwarts contribution plus 100, current Hogwarts contribution, 500. Because they didn't kill the Death Eaters, each person only increased their contribution by 50 points, but Bylin will continue to stay in Hogwarts, and he can't execute the small eyes and scar face in front of Onion Nose Bar. But he looked at the main task, the second phase of the defense of Hogwarts, the Trial of Loyalty, in progress. Trial of Loyalty, let Harry and Sirius Black successfully recognize each other, and let Peter Pettigrew get the punishment he deserves. Harry has recognized Black and his son, but the second stage has not been completed. It should be that Peter Pettigrew has not been punished, so Black has not chased him yet. Bylin shouted in Snape's direction from a distance, "Take Harry and Lupin back to the castle. I'm going after Peter." Onion Nose glanced at Snape, and wanted to step forward to stop Bylin from leaving, but Bylin quickly stepped forward to pick up a broom with small eyes or a scarred face, and flew towards the direction Black left, the direction of the Black Lake. Onion Nose stomped his feet, turned back to look for his broom, and when he looked up, Bylin had long since disappeared. Harry watched Bylin leave, turned to Snape and said, "Professor Snape, please help bring Professor Lupin back to the castle, and we will explain it clearly in front of Principal Dumbledore." In the original book, Snape was stunned, and was transported back to the castle by Blake using the levitation spell, but this time it was replaced by poor Lupin. He has not fully recovered from the werewolf state, but Big Tooth it has gradually become smaller, and the face has gradually become shorter. Snape snorted coldly, without saying a word, tilted Harry, who was still holding his wand and looked nervous, walked into the hut, controlled Lupin's body with the levitation charm, and walked towards the castle. Full of confidence in Bylin, Harry glanced at Lupin, who was suffering from the Cruciatus curse, gritted his teeth, and followed Snape. Belan didn't stop, and soon flew to the edge of the Black Lake. The Black Lake at night is even more mysterious and deep, bottomless, and small patches of moonlight are reflected on the water surface. It feels like the moonlight has been absorbed by the Black Lake. Reflecting only a little. The big black dog turned into by Sirius Black was wandering back and forth on the shore. Bylin turned over, jumped off the broom, and threw the broom casually on the grass. Blake changed into a human form, and said angrily to Hi-Hu, "The smell is gone now, I should have jumped into the lake." While observing the environment on the lake, Bylin said, "We can't let him go, he must be punished on the spot today." Blake took off his coat and said bitterly, "Peter is very good at water, let's dive together." Bylin said, "Hey, I just happen to have a useful little skill. Mermaid's blessing." With a wave of Bylin's hand, 2 mermaid-like phantoms appeared in the air, but they were not the beautiful girls in fairy tales, but more like fat-headed fish with yellow-green seaweed-like hair and human arms. Regardless of whether the mermaids in the world of Harry Potter are good-looking or not, the phantoms of the 2 mermaids slowly landed on the heads of Bylin and Black, and they suddenly felt itchy under their ears. Mermaid-like gills, looking at the palm, there are webs growing between the fingers. This is much easier to use than the ordinary bubble head spell. Not only can it breathe underwater, but it can also swim as fast as a mermaid. Blake was very novel, but his hatred for Peter made him grit his teeth, rushed to the lake and plunged into the icy lake. Bylin muttered, "I really hope to invent a warming spell or something." He took off his coat and shoes and jumped into the lake. His coats were all carefully made by Catherine, with exquisite materials and excellent workmanship, but in the water, it obviously only has the effect of dragging down the swimming speed. The cold lake water made Bylin shiver, but he has been exercising all year round and has a good physique, so he quickly adapted to it. Opening his eyes, he didn't expect that even though it was night, the effect of the mermaid's summoning allowed him to see far in the lake. He and Black were separated by tens of meters, expanding the search range and swimming towards the depths of the Black Lake. There are several meters of seaweed growing on the bottom of the Black Lake. If something the size of a mouse is hiding in it, dozens of people will probably not be able to find it. However, although Peter is good at water, there is obviously no mermaid calling or carrying it with him. It is unrealistic for Gilgrass to hide at the bottom of the lake. It is more likely to swim farther desperately, and then find a chance to go ashore and hide. There are a lot of fish in the Black Lake, the big ones are nearly 2 meters long. If Peter turns into a mouse and swims, not only will his speed be slow, but he will be easily buried in the belly of the fish. Bylin was thinking about countermeasures while swimming and searching. At this time, a group of Grindylow water monsters swam from the bottom of the lake and circled Belan. This is a level 1-2 magical creature in the Black Lake. The upper body is a bit like a goblin or house elf, and the lower body is like an octopus. There are many tentacles like feet. Grindylow is very unfriendly to muggles and wizards, or they are just a group of mischievous little villains who can't tell the difference. In Ireland, there are often cases of drowning people being tricked by Grindylow and then drowned. In the part of Special and the Goblet of Fire, the 4 warriors who also prevented them from going into the water to save people. But Bylin is very happy. He already has a magical creature affinity +4. Simply put, this level of creature affinity will make many creatures that are already friendly to humans, or low-level unfriendly creatures, will treat Bylin as the same kind. Chapter 31. Overlord Octopus. When the affinity was +2 before, Bylin could easily get the approval of the friendly Phoenix Fox, but expecting +8 or +10 affinity in the future to be able to make friends with the Basilisk and the Fire Dragon is just a dream. Grindylow swam around Belan, his face like a big-mouthed frog changed from a little confused and hideous, to gradually getting familiar with Belan's appearance and breath. Bylin stretched out his fingers and gently scratched Grindylow's stomach beside him. The little thing smiled strangely and twisted its tentacles, looking very happy. It is very difficult to speak in the water, but it is not impossible to do it at all. After Bylin gestured for a long time, the Grindylows realized that Bylin wanted them to help trick a human wizard who had just jumped into the lake. After arriving at Black not far away, Bylin made gestures for a long time, finally let them understand that it was another wizard, and then rushed away. The huge black lake stretches for miles. Looking for a person or a mouse is undoubtedly looking for a needle in a haystack. Even mermaid villages are easier to find, but Bylin sneaked in to seal a few mermaids during the summer vacation, so he didn't go to those carved out. The conch or snail shell-shaped lake bottom building is approaching. Finally, a Grindylow brought news, and Bylin quickly joined Black and swam towards the direction Grindylow pointed. After swimming for a long time, they should have approached the center of the Black Lake. Both of them heard the sound of stirring in the water in the distance. A figure was surrounded by dozens of Grindylows in the water. Peter. Blake's eyes widened, and he swam towards that side at a faster speed. I saw Peter Pettigrew's short and fat body covered with bubblehead curse blisters, being tossed around by the Grindylows, throwing various spells non-stop, but the Grindylows swam fast, and most of them the spells all fell through. Blake aimed at Peter with a trick of Shenfengguiying. He didn't want to stun Peter with a sleeping spell, he had a strong desire to hurt him and make him hurt. However, the God's Edge curse had no effect at all underwater, and the underwater resistance was too great. When the blade flew to Peter's side, it had no strength at all, but it made Peter discover the 2 people rushing over. Peter was so frightened that he aimed a Cruciatus curse in Blake's direction. Regardless of whether he hit it or not, he slammed the Grindylows away and swam to the depths of the lake. Bylin knocked Black away fiercely, allowing him to avoid the Cruciatus curse. Black smiled embarrassedly at Bylin. He had never fought underwater before, so he couldn't help but make some mistakes. Bylin swung his legs and chased after him. Peter's water skills are indeed good, but it can't compare to the mermaid's speed. The distance between the two is gradually getting closer, and if they get closer, Bylin will have the confidence to disarm him with one move. But at this moment, a huge black shadow rushed up from the deep bottom of the lake. Almost hit Peter. Peter was hit by the waves and rolled a few times, and when he took a closer look, it turned out to be a giant octopus about the size of a truck. Overlord Octopus, a level 9 creature, the overlord of the Black Lake, should have lived in the deep sea of the North Pole, but for some reason there is one in the Black Lake, and it has adapted to the freshwater environment. It is a neutral creature with infinite power, no one dares to easily provoke it. Apparently the 3 of them had already entered the range of the Overlord Octopus lair, so it rushed out angrily, but the Overlord Octopus in the Black Lake had lived peacefully with Hogwarts for many years and had never actively attacked humans. Peter was taken aback by the Tyrannosaurus Octopus, but soon he realized that he also went to Hogwarts when he was a child, so he is no stranger to the Tyrannosaurus Octopus. Students can often see the Tyrannosaurus turning over on the water from the window. Knowing that it is a neutral creature, it will not take the initiative to hurt itself, but the pursuers behind it are gradually approaching, and Peter is afraid, pointing his wand at the head of the Overlord Octopus, and shouting, "Iperio, traveling, soul curse." The mental strength of the Tyrant Octopus is no worse than that of humans. Peter obviously tried his best, and even blood shot from his nostrils, but the Tyrant Octopus was trembling all over, and its huge eyes suddenly turned white. Arms, feet, and tentacles head towards Bylin and Black. WTF. Bylin's 3 souls scared away 2.5 souls. Who would have thought that Peter would play such a trick, and the level 9 Overlord Octopus would steal the soul as soon as he said that he would steal the soul. In front of Peter, you can touch it with your hand, which is a cheap move. All petrification. Black, who was a few meters behind Bai Lin, arrived in time, and cast a petrification curse on the octopus tentacles that rolled towards Bai Lin. The tentacles stiffened immediately, and Bai Lin easily avoided it. The other octopus tentacles seemed to be woven into a big net, and the suction cups on the top of the bowl made people tremble. Even if they were not entangled, Bai Lin felt like a big hole would be sucked out by just being sucked by the suction cups. Fortunately, the blessing of the mermaid made Bai Lin very flexible in the water, but the Overlord Octopus is too big. When its huge mouth part sucks, it forms a strong current, which makes Bai Lin and Black swim towards its mouth involuntarily. Go! The front teeth are a big stick. Bai Lin looked at the huge fangs around the mouth parts of the Overlord Octopus, and couldn't help but think of this funny spell. Suddenly, the fangs of the Overlord Octopus grew up one after another, so big that they touched the mouth parts on the other side, blocked its big mouth. Bai Lin kicked on the enlarged fangs and swam out. 2 huge tentacles came towards him. Bai Lin hurriedly shouted, "Shrink quickly!" In one section, it shrunk rapidly, turning into a comical shape with 2 big ends and a small middle, and Bai Lin got out from the gap. Black was still frankly using the petrification spell to resist the attack of the tentacles. Bai Lin shouted, "Go and deal with Peter, just shoot his wand down." Blake quickly took the order and circled outward. The Overlord Octopus still wanted to use its tentacles to stop Black, but Bai Lin aimed at the base of one of the tentacles and said, "Ice arrow." Right now in the water, the ice arrow didn't fly over like an arrow, but ice formed directly from the tip of Bai Lin's magic wand to the base of the tentacles of the Overlord Octopus. Several tentacles were frozen, and the Overlord Octopus immediately, the movement of chasing Black was restrained, and the 2 tentacles swung in the air, and Black escaped successfully. Bai Lin struggled to swim in the gaps between the tentacles, and slowly approached the side of the Overlord Octopus. If it weren't for the blessing of the mermaid, with the swimming speed of a human being, I'm afraid it would have been grabbed by the tentacles and stuffed into the terrifying mouth parts. Finally, Bai Lin froze the 2 tentacles blocking his way again, quickly slid through the gap in the ice, and squeezed out from the dangerous tentacles. On the other side, Blake finally saw Peter, who was trying to control the Octopus King, and his eyes were bleeding. He swung his legs, jumped into the attack range, and shouted at Peter's wrist, "Expelliarmus! Accept your weapon!" Chapter 32. Sonic controls the enemy. Peter was concentrating on controlling the Overlord Octopus, but he didn't see Black coming out in a flash, and the wand in his hand was immediately knocked into the air. Peter felt a pain in his hand, and the imperious curse was forced to stop. Immediately, the spell had a backlash against him. His eyes went dark, but he woke up with a strong desire to survive. He pretended to be unconscious, and waited. Blake approached. As far as Peter knew, Sirius Black always had the aristocratic pride and self-confidence of the Black family, and would not attack an opponent who had lost resistance. But at this time, Black had already been in prison in Azkaban for 12 years, and the Dementors had already driven him to the point of insanity countless times, but he survived. A young man who has not experienced vicissitudes is much more cruel. Blake didn't get close to Peter, but immediately cast a confinement spell on Peter, imprisoning Peter's hands and feet, and then rushed forward, punching Peter in the stomach very rudely. Peter couldn't bear it anymore, and woke up from pretending to faint. Perhaps because he thought it was not enough to fight in the water, Blake grabbed Peter by the collar and dragged him to the surface of the water. Peter's bubblehead charm automatically expired when he came out of the water and touched the air. Before he could repeat the trick and beg for mercy, he was punched in the face by Black, almost knocking his nose out. "I swore not to use the 3 forbidden curses on people, but I can't help it today." Black didn't have Harry to dissuade him this time, and he punched Peter until his face exploded. But at this moment, the battle at the bottom of the water also became fierce. Although Peter's imperious curse was terminated, the intense mental pain directly drove the Overlord Octopus crazy. A strong and foul-smelling ink spewed out. I don't know how long it has been since there was a creature in the Black Lake that could make the tyrant octopus spit out ink. Although the ink of ordinary octopuses is not only non-toxic, but sometimes used as a condiment, Bai Lin suspects that this ink is already in the cavity of the tyrant octopus. It has been preserved for hundreds of years, and it is simply old wine. Just the sticky, fishy, and smelly touch makes Bai Lin almost faint from smoke. What is even more frightening is that the sticky ink seeped into Bai Lin's gills, he couldn't take a breath at once, and choked on a big mouthful of foul-smelling lake water. The Overlord Octopus really deserves to be a level 9 creature, the Overlord of the Black Lake. With just this mouthful of old spittle, the basilisk and fire dragon might be sprayed and crash on the spot. Bai Lin's eyes were darkened, and he was trying his best to swim towards the surface of the water, but he was caught suddenly, and was wrapped around his waist by a tentacle. Bai Lin held his breath hard, quickly pulled out his long sword, aimed at the tentacles and stabbed in, but the Overlord Octopus's skin was unbelievably thick. With this sword, it was like hitting the rubber tire of a large truck, stabbing in it's not deep, and the blade is still stuck. Don't think about cutting off the tentacles with a single stroke. As soon as he opened his mouth, black water would pour into his mouth, and he couldn't utter the spell at all. Bai Lin's heart suddenly turned around in a hurry. Maybe the Overlord Octopus wanted to slam Bai Lin to death, and entangled Bai Lin's tentacles. Because the deerskin winter vest Bai Lin was wearing couldn't directly absorb Bai Lin's flesh and blood, the Overlord Octopus leaned out of the water suddenly, threw Bai Lin fiercely into the air. Bai Lin's body was completely empty. Feeling that he was thrown out of the water, he couldn't help being shocked, and quickly took a deep breath of air. If he stayed in the black water for a while, he might be suffocated to death. But then he went down, and looking down, didn't the landing point be the bloody mouth of the Overlord Octopus? Bai Lin frantically grabbed the magic pocket that comes standard with wizards, and unexpectedly grabbed the animal binding rope that was in the magic killing gift package bought at the Horror Tour Travel Company. Bai Lin was overjoyed, and was frantically twisting as soon as one of the tentacles moved, the beast binding rope was thrown out. The rope had some magical effects, and it automatically flew out to bind the tentacle. Like Spider-Man in the movie, Bai Lin pulled the rope hard, deviated from the falling angle, let go, and landed on the side of the Overlord Octopus. In the water by its basin-sized eyes. Close your ears and listen. Bai Lin cast a spell on himself, and then threw the screaming mandrake into the ear hole next to the Overlord Octopus eyes. The mandrake had just appeared, and Bai Lin followed up with a loud voice, loud curse, and gave the mandrake another blessing. Before the Overlord Octopus could fully react, the scream far surpassing that of ordinary mandrakes came directly from its ear holes. The impact directly caused the ear and nose to bleed, which was the effect of the ear-closing curse, and the Overlord Octopus almost directly destroyed its auditory nerves, causing his brain, which was already in a mess tormented by the imperious curse, to crash immediately. Bai Lin bit the tip of his tongue. The severe pain kept him awake for the last time. He aimed at the Overlord Octopus to open the seal of the illustrated book, and then his eyes went dark, and he passed out directly. On the other side, the Overlord Octopus jumped out of the water, rolled up a huge wave and directly overturned Blake, who was beating Peter. The two rolled over the water several times and fell into the water again. The person was so shocked that he almost fainted on the water again. Peter resisted the sharp pain in his ears, seized the opportunity, turned into a mouse in an instant, and swam far away. Red Ketau. Shattered bones. Blake, who fell into the water, choked on water, but he soon realized that Peter had escaped again, and he didn't show mercy anymore. Cast the bone-crushing curse. Facts proved that Black's choice was right. At this time, the sky in the east was just a little bright, the moon had already set, and the view on the lake was even worse than at midnight. In addition, the Overlord Octopus made waves on the lake, and Black couldn't see it at all. Clear Peter's figure. The bone-crushing curse was originally used to deal with obstacles, and it had no effect on living organisms, but Black didn't want to hit Peter, but exploded on the water beside Peter, and the splash of water blasted Peter's thin white mouse body to the ground. In mid-air, it almost killed him directly, his eyes went dark, and he floated on the water. Blake watched the white mouse being lifted up and down by the explosion, gritted his teeth, and swam over. Seeing the white mouse fainted on the water surface without moving, he wanted to kill Peter directly with one move, but in the end, he still sighing, he couldn't do anything, turned into a big dog, and grabbed Peter in one bite. Looking back, the Overlord Octopus was being sealed by Bai Lin, turned into a brilliance and disappeared, and Bai Lin also passed out on the water. Black swam over with all his strength, put his head on Bai Lin's back, and pushed him to the shore. Chapter 33. Sealing the Animagus. The turmoil was finally over. Back at the castle, Snape and Harry found Dumbledore immediately, and Dumbledore arranged for Ms. Pomfrey to take care of the injured and fainted Lupin. He had gradually recovered on the way humanoid, but the Cruciatus curse and Harry's sleeping curse have hit him hard, and I'm afraid he needs careful care to recover slowly. After listening to Harry's simple explanation, Dumbledore drove out of the castle with Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick, and heard the astonishing screams on the surface of the Black Lake from a distance. When they rushed to the shore, Black became the big black dog that had grown up carried the fainted Bylin to the shore. Blake clenched Peter tightly, and collapsed on the sand on the shore. When Bylin woke up, he was already lying on the soft and comfortable hospital bed in the Hogwarts infirmary. Catherine was lying beside him, and had already fallen asleep. Late fight. Bylin caressed Catherine's hair. Catherine shook her head and woke up. Bylin opened his arms, and Catherine threw herself into his arms, but at this moment, the three little ones pushed open the door of the ward noisily, and rushed in. I heard that the professor killed 3 Death Eaters in one night. Ron was still talking. But Hermione saw the two hugging each other on the bed, her emotions dripped down immediately, her small mouth turned up, and she didn't say a word. Harry was holding a glass jar in his hand. Seeing that Bylin had woken up, he quickly quickened his pace and said, "Professor, you're awake. I knew you must be fine." Catherine glanced at Bylin with some resentment, got up from his arms as if nothing had happened, and greeted the 3 little ones with a smile. Bylin nodded to Harry and said, "In your hand, is Peter." Ron was the first to say, "Scabbers is actually in Black's mouth," but Harry insists that it's not Scabbers, but Peter Pettigrew. "I'm so confused, Professor, come and judge us." Harry said helplessly. Sirius handed Peter over to me, and he was controlled by Snape and Filch. Now they have deprived him of his wand and locked him in the basement, while Professor Lupin is still unconscious. I don't even know what to do. Bylin grabbed the glass jar Harry handed over, and the grey-white mouse curled up at the bottom of the glass jar as if dead. Bylin said to Ron, "Ron, do you believe me?" Ron hurriedly said, "Of course I believe in you, you are my idol." "Professor." Bylin said, "What Harry said is true. For the specific situation, I put a video camera in Hagrid's hut, just above the fireplace. You have to go to Hogsmeade to find a Muggle projector. Now that the truth is revealed, it records the changes of Black, Lupin and Peter in all the confrontation process. You can understand it at a glance. When the people from the Ministry of Magic come, you give the videotape to Fudge." Ron still looked at the mouse in the glass jar in disbelief and said, "Then, Professor, do you want to kill it?" Bylin stared at the mouse and said, "Although Peter is not as evil as other dark wizards, the bad things he has done are enough to make him suffer the cruelest punishment. He is a Death Eater who killed Harry's parents, killed 13 Muggles, planted it on his brother Black, and cast the Cruciatus curse on Lupin and Black yesterday. I won't kill it, since he likes being a mouse so much, I'll let him get a mouse punishment." Bylin aimed at the mouse in the jar, and opened the seal of the illustrated book. Immediately, the system interface in front of Bylin and Catherine sent a series of prompts. Successfully seal an animagus, the illustrated book score plus 400, magic bonus plus 3. Bylin, Kellen White, strength, 15, magic, 15, plus 42. The total score of the illustrated book, 2120, the magic bonus of the illustrated book, 42, the affinity for magical creatures, plus 5, the summoned beasts, White Werewolf Swafeng, level 4, Screaming Mandrake, level 1, Blessing of the Mermaid, level 3, sealing the Overlord Squid actually directly increased Bylin's magic power by 5 points, and Bylin said it was not a loss. The biggest surprise is that Swafeng has been upgraded from level 3 to level 4. It seems that the score of the illustrated book also has a bonus for summoned beasts. Eliminate a Death Eater, Hogwarts contribution plus 100, current Hogwarts contribution 600. Main task, the second phase of the Hogwarts defense battle, the Trial of Loyalty, completed. Main task, the final stage of the defense of Hogwarts, the Trial of Will, start. Trial of Will, defeat an enraged Bellatrix Lestrange and her Death Eaters to defend Hogwarts. Dementors have a certain chance to join the battle. Is he dead? Looking at the radiant mouse body, Ron asked sadly. No, I sealed it and made him a mouse forever, never to be a human again. Bylin patted Ron's shoulder comfortingly and said, "You will have a new pet." With such a major incident, Hogwarts could not handle the matter by itself, so Dumbledore notified the Ministry of Magic immediately. The Minister of Magic, Fudge, came very quickly, along with 4 Aurors and a tall man wearing a hood. This time the incident was serious. Not only was Black arrested, but 3 Death Eaters were also found. Although Fudge has been unwilling to admit that Voldemort and his men have made a comeback, the dark mark on their arms cannot deceive people. Fudge first met the onion-nosed Auror, Louter Archer, and Louter reported to Fudge in detail what he knew, and then he realized that these troubles were all related to his restless and cheap nephew. He found Black, killed Antonin, and subdued the small eyes. Although the scarred face was the weapon Louter removed, Bai Lin caught him. Fudge came to the ward with a gloomy expression, rolled his eyes again and ate dog food on the spot. Bai Lin and Catherine kissed directly for 5 minutes, while Fudge waited awkwardly at the door with Auror. Dumbledore, who came a step late, obviously eased the embarrassment, because Catherine had already got up, and stood aside with a red face. "Ah, Uncle Fudge, you are here, please forgive my inconvenience," Bai Lin said with a smile. Fudge waved his hand impatiently, and squinted at Dumbledore beside him. Dumbledore walked to Bai Lin with a kind expression, caring about his physical condition enthusiastically. "Your Excellency, Auror should have already reported the situation to you, do you need me to add something?" Bai Lin glanced at Onion Nose. Then he glanced at the tall man following them from the corner of his eye. With a wave of Fudge's hand, a young Auror took out a notebook and a quill, preparing to record Bai Lin's confession. Chapter 34. The Fourth Death Eater. Fudge said, "We have a lot of time, tell us everything you know. Your action this time is not approved. Although the dead are Death Eaters, your behavior is also very suspicious. Don't expect we will treat you like a hero." Bai Lin smiled and said, "As you wish, uncle." He paused and said, "As we all know, I am a researcher of magical creatures. I have acquired an ability, the Eye of Insight, through years of research. Nimigus is in front of me, and I can see his true colors at a glance." Fudge frowned and said, "This can explain how you found Black, but what does it have to do with Death Eaters?" Bai Lin said, "The Eye of Insight can not only see through transfiguration, but also the way wizards conceal their physical features. Yes, even if I use a spell to cover up the black mark on my left arm, I can see through it at a glance. For example, you, Mr. McNeil." Everyone was shocked, and the tall man standing at the end was even more frightened. When he took out his wand angrily, Catherine, who had already quietly stood beside him as if harmless to humans and animals, had already shouted, "Expert! Yamas! Unarmed!" McNeil exclaimed, and his wand was knocked away by Catherine. With a loud shout, he threw himself at Catherine. He was tall and muscular, and he was the famous executioner of the Ministry of Magic's Animal Control Committee. Catherine was startled, and she stood too close. Bai Lin gritted his teeth and was about to cast a spell, but Dumbledore was faster than him, and he didn't hear him humming. McNeil was frozen in midair, as if frozen, only 2 eyeballs could move. Fudge was quite frightened. He obviously had relatively long neurons, and he didn't react for a while. Dumbledore said, "They must be controlled immediately. If they touch the mark of the dark demon, the mysterious man can be notified." Fuji glanced at Bai Lin, who was relieved and calmed down again, and said, "Your accusation is very serious, it needs to be verified." Bai Lin jumped down from the hospital bed, pretended to take out his wand, and said to McNeil's arm, "The corpse reappears." His Chinese spell attracted Dumbledore to look at him with great interest. However, the Chinese spell is obviously effective. McNeil usually has his sleeves rolled up and his arms exposed, so no one has doubted him, but at this moment, a brand mark clearly appeared on his left arm. A huge skeleton spit out a poisonous snake. Several Aurors, including Fudge, exclaimed. One Auror stepped forward, examined it carefully, nodded at Fudge, and said, "Mr. Minister, it's true." Fudge looked at Bai Lin, and Bai Lin shrugged and said, "I only discovered this ability recently. I went to a bar in Hogsmeade for a drink that day and saw this on the arm of Antonin Dolokhov at the next table. Well, I was terrified." He winked at Fudge, but he didn't look terrified. Bai Lin continued, "Catherine and I lured Antonin out of curiosity, who knew that he threw a death-defying curse at me without saying a word. Luckily I used my exclusive summoning technique in time, blocked me for a while, and finally Catherine and I fought with him for a long time, and finally when he released the killing curse on Catherine, I was forced to throw the long sword and kill him. As for the other 2 Death Eaters, they should be Antonin's accomplices. They disguised themselves as Aurors and came to arrest me. Mr. Auror should have reported the rest of the matter." Bai Lin talked eloquently. Fudge continued to ask, "What about Blake? He is also a Death Eater, some people say you are with him." Bai Lin slapped his forehead and said, "I almost forgot about him. Both he and Peter Pettigrew are animagus, transformers, who have not registered with the Ministry of Magic. I saw through them at a glance, but I didn't act rashly. It is trying to find out the truth of the matter. Fudge said angrily, what self-righteous truth? You should immediately report to the Ministry of Magic to deal with him. Bai Lin said, about the truth, I've already recorded the video. Don't worry, I'll show you right away. Dumbledore clapped while pinching and said, Mr. Kelling has noble qualities, which is very rare. Connolly, Fudge's name, why don't we drink tea together, and then listen to Mr. Kelling's continued testimony? Fudge gave Bai Lin a hard look, but agreed to Dumbledore's proposal, and ordered the Aurors to properly imprison the Death Eaters. After obtaining the evidence, the Aurors would eliminate the effect of the Dark Mark, and then follow the procedures to detain the Death Eaters. Escorted to Azkaban. The three little ones rushed back to Hogwarts an hour later, bringing a whole set of projection equipment. Bai Lin did not expect that Dumbledore would be there, and said a little embarrassedly, actually, Mr. Dumbledore can also obtain to pull the truth out of Harry's memory, but I used some simple Muggle devices. Fudge suppressed his temper forcibly, and watched the whole videotape, including the whole process of confrontation in Hagrid's hut. Dumbledore smiled, obviously he knew the truth a long time ago, but suffered from lack of evidence, and now Bai Lin solved one of his problem's big problem. To the surprise of the three little ones, there was also a video of Malfoy repeatedly provoking Big Buck in the video, which caused Big Buck to attack him. It's a trivial matter that a winged beast accidentally injures a student, but with this videotape, and the executioner that the Ministry of Magic arranged to execute Piccolo happened to be a Death Eater, Fudge has long since given up on that poor animal. Buckbeak, I mean that hippogriff, is it all right, sir? Harry asked Fudge still excitedly. The corner of Fudge's mouth twitched, he waved his hands impatiently and said, let it go, I will explain to Lucius. The children cheered. What about my godfather? I mean Sirius Black? Harry asked. Fudge said, I'm afraid he can't be released immediately. The Department of Magic Law in the Auror office will find out the truth. I don't think it will be too long. Dumbledore stood up and said loudly, a day when the truth comes out. Mr. Carlin, you saved 2 lives. Of course, you also subdued 4 villains. I will apply to the Ministry of Magic for the Order of Merlin for you. But Bai Lin rubbed his hands at Fudge and said, hey, Uncle Fudge, you can put aside the matter of the medal, about Black's bounty and the Ministry of Magic's reward for catching Death Eaters, can you send it to me sooner? I will make it to order. I bought a firebolt, and a few hundred galleons for the final payment. Fudge rolled his eyes. Chapter 35. Customized equipment. In the end, Dumbledore persuaded Fudge, and extracted the memories of Bai Lin, Harry and the awakened Lupin as evidence, and Black was free, but he was not allowed to use the wand in the short term, purely love-weird punishment for ignoring. Hagrid was also punished not to use his wand and used it hidden in a pink umbrella, and he was not allowed to leave Hogwarts. Harry was overjoyed, and was happy to tell everyone the good news. Let's just assume that everyone else thought it was good news. A series of trivial matters finally came to an end. Fudge came and went in a hurry, and returned to the Ministry of Magic with the 3 prisoners imprisoned by the Aurors. Before leaving, he withdrew 2,000 galleons from Bai Lin. Although it was not as much as Bai Lin imagined, it was Fuji's greatest sincerity. After seeing off the Ministry of Magic, Dumbledore winked mischievously at Bai Lin and walked away. With McNeil added, Bai Lin already had 650 Hogwarts contribution points and he couldn't wait to return to Hufflepuff's portrait wall. Ask blacksmith old Addison about equipment exchange. And Catherine was very curious about the portraits that could make magic equipment. She looked left and right, and once suspected that Bai Lin was coaxing her to play. Old Addison thought for a long while, and agreed to Bai Lin's request to order a magic increasing ring with 650 contribution points, but he still mentioned by the way that if there is a piece of magic equipment as a sacrifice, it can make the created equipment more powerful. Excellent. Bai Lin couldn't help but fell into deep thought, and finally he had an idea and thought, Rowena Ravenclaw's crown. Catherine was stunned. What is this? It sounds like something from Ravenclaw College. Bai Lin explained, one of Voldemort's 7 Horcruxes, only it should be placed on the plaster statue in the Room of Requirement now. It must be a powerful magical equipment, and it is not suitable for wearing. Although the legend said that wearing a crown can bring wisdom to people, but it is said that people who wear it die miserably. Catherine had no idea what Bai Lin was talking about, but she was a little confused. In short, it was a very important thing of the terrible mysterious person, and Bai Lin happened to know the location of this thing. Anyone who has seen Harry Potter knows that Voldemort has 7 Horcruxes, which store 7 fragments of his soul. As long as one fragment is still in the world, Voldemort cannot be completely killed. The 7 Horcruxes are: 1. Tom Riddle's diary, has been destroyed by Harry with the snake's teeth in the Chamber of Secrets event in the first half of 1993. 2. Marvolo Gaunt's ring, in the Half-Blood Prince, it was found and destroyed by Dumbledore in Gaunt's old house, but because of this, Dumbledore was cursed and could not live for a year. 3. Slytherin's locket, destroyed by Ron with the Gryffindor sword in the Half-Blood Prince. 4. Hufflepuff's cup, found in Gringotts in the Deathly Hallows, destroyed by Hermione with poisonous snake teeth. 5. Ravenclaw's golden crown, in the Deathly Hallows, in the novel, it was accidentally destroyed by Crabbe with accursed fire, in the movie, it was pierced by Harry with poisonous snake teeth and thrown into fiend fire. 6. Basilisk Nagini, in the Deathly Hallows, Neville beheaded with Gryffindor's sword. 7. Inside Harry Potter, the last battle in the Deathly Hallows was destroyed by Voldemort himself. Except for the fragments in Harry's body, the other pieces were carefully hidden by Voldemort, but there is a wonderful one among them, that is, the Golden Crown, of Ravenclaw. It is not accompanied by a curse like a ring, nor does it have to be decrypted like a locket, nor is it a powerful guardian like a basilisk. The crown is so casually thrown in the room of responsiveness, and it is easy to get it. It's just a plot bug. But what makes the crown different from other things is that it is clearly written in the book that it is a piece of magical equipment. It is the only relic of Rowena Ravenclaw, one of the founders of Hogwarts. She enchanted it to increase the wits of the wearer. The only other equipment that can be clearly identified as magic equipment should be the Great Sword of Gryffindor and the 3 Deathly Hallows. The Room of Requirement has 2 entrances, the first being the 8th floor of Hogwarts Castle. Opposite the tapestry where the troll hits silly Barnabas with a club. When the user concentrates on the desired venue and walks through that section of the wall 3 times, a very smooth door will appear on the wall, which can enter the Room of Requirement, and the second one is behind the portrait of Hogsmeade's Pig's Head Bar. The secret passage can be entered. The first entrance is quite troublesome. If you want to think about what you desire the most, this Lin really has no idea what is the thing he desires the most. In addition, this entrance is often not open, and it is a lucky type, so Lin directly chose the second entrance. After Lin finished his daytime lectures, he sneaked to Hogsmeade Village. Catherine was waiting for him at the entrance of the Pig's Head Bar, wearing a white slim-fit fur coat. The carnival Halloween has just passed, Black's bounty has also been revoked, and the number of tourists in Hogsmeade has decreased a lot. There were not many customers in the Pig's Head Bar. Like most of the customers, Lin ordered 2 glasses of butter beer, and when the lights were dim, they got into the secret passage behind the portrait of Ariana, Dumbledore's sister. In fact, Hogwarts Castle is still a few miles away from Hogsmeade Village, and the Room of Requirement is still on the 8th floor of the castle, but the 2 started from the Pig's Head Bar and walked through the dark secret passage for a short time before arriving at Bright Hall. The Room of Requirement arrives. This is a pretty big room, no wonder it is enough to be the place where the young wizards of the Order of the Phoenix practice magic in the later plots. The decoration of the room is antique, and it is surrounded by various objects. Lin glanced around and saw shiny treasure chests, piles of galleons, weapon racks shining coldly, etc., but they all knew that these were just hallucinations from the room, and they couldn't be taken out. Except for the head of a plaster statue in the corner, which is wearing a gleaming golden crown inlaid with various gemstones. Lin said, "Be careful, I'll get it, you can knock me out anytime." Catherine nodded and took out her wand. Lin carefully removed the crown from the head of the statue, but nothing happened. Lin was fully prepared, because the original book mentioned that the crown would entice people to wear it to gain wisdom, but its past the owner did not fare well. The bottom edge of the crown is engraved with Ravenclaw's famous motto, "Extraordinary wisdom is the greatest wealth of human beings." But wisdom requires human talent, hard work, and insight, and it can be obtained from a hat. Wisdom itself is a paradox. Obtain Ravenclaw's crown, mission prop, destroy it to get Hogwarts contribution points, and open the side mission, the 7 Deadly Sins. Chapter 36. Ferrari in the Broom. Regardless of him, Lin put the crown into the wizard's backpack, but failed, and a reminder appeared on the illustration book. Props for special missions, which contain soul fragments, cannot be stored in space packages. Well, Lin took out a shirt and packed the crown, and the 2 of them didn't go back to the Pig's Head Bar, but got out through the exit in the direction of Hogwarts. The 2 appeared in a corridor, and 2 students passed by. Seeing the 2 suddenly appear, they recognized Bai Lin, a young professor who had recently become famous in the student circle, and nodded respectfully to them. It's so common at Hogwarts that it doesn't surprise people if you fall from the ceiling. Bai Lin looked around blankly, and it turned out to be the corridor of Slytherin College. He didn't want to meet Snape, who was wandering around with nothing to do, which would affect his good mood for the day, so he hurriedly dragged Catherine to Hufflepuff. Portrait wall. Strange to say, it was clearly a painting, but Bai Lin handed the crown to Edison smoothly. The old blacksmith glanced at it, and threw it into the furnace in the blacksmith's shop without saying anything. The corners of Bai Lin's mouth twitched, and said that there were many gems on the crown. It would be a waste to throw it into the furnace, but he thought, Voldemort's soul, he doesn't know what the fragments are, whether they are evenly stored on the entire crown, or just in a certain corner, or it is safer to destroy the whole thing. Bai Lin waited quietly for Addison's results, but Harry, who was studying hard with a spell book in the dormitory, suddenly felt a sharp pain on his forehead, and suddenly saw himself in a dark hall with a coiled the giant basilisk, and just passed out. Finally, Bai Lin got a prompt from the illustrated book system. Destroy a piece of Tom Riddle's soul and get 500 Hogwarts contribution. Open side mission, 7 Deadly Sins. The 7 Deadly Sins. Tom Riddle divided his soul into 7 pieces and hid them in 7 Horcruxes, representing the 7 deadly sins of Tom Riddle. There are still 5 Horcruxes in this world. Device, get 5% of the world's development, currently 5% of the world's development. Bai Lin couldn't help feeling a pain in the head. What kind of thing is the development speed of this world? But he was overjoyed that the contribution of destroying a Horcrux was 500, and he was able to forge one more piece of equipment. After a few more minutes, Addison was done, holding out a silver ring from the painting. Bai Lin quickly took it and took a look. The shape of the ring was simple and unsophisticated, and many small plant patterns were carved on it with hollow-out techniques. Generally speaking, although there is no jewel or jewel, it is still exquisite. Exquisite mithril ring, 8th grade boutique, magic power +8, magic effect increase +10%. Bai Lin and Catherine couldn't help being a little surprised. It was indeed a high-quality equipment obtained by destroying a magic item. The attributes exploded. In addition to the 8-point attribute, there was an additional 10% increase in magic effects. Bai Lin put the ring on the index finger of his left hand. The magic power reached 15, plus 50, immediately, already close to Snape's level. Bai Lin felt that he could even fight him directly. For the remaining 500 contribution points, Bai Lin customized a hat that could increase magic defense, and Edison readily agreed to let them pick it up tomorrow. The days became calmer for a few more days, because Black's charges had been cleared, and the Ministry of Magic had asked Azkaban to remove the Dementors, but Azkaban did not immediately implement this order, and the Dementor guarded at the gate of the castle. The ghosts did disappear, but some students still saw hooded shadows occasionally wandering around the castle at night. Bai Lin's evaluation is, it's easy to ask God to send God away. These Dementors ran for such a trip and found nothing. Why are they willing to go back like this? The Dementors were originally allies of the Dark Lord. From Grindelwald to Voldemort, they and the Dementors, the ghosts, have an inexplicable connection, so the Dementors are extra interested in Harry. Bai Lin is happy to see them survive. If they all run away, where can he find the Dementors to kill? These are all precious points. As for the students of Hogwarts, a major event at Hogwarts will be ushered in after October, the Quidditch House Cup competition. The Gryffindor team has not won a trophy for 8 consecutive years. Captain Wood is about to graduate soon. This is his last chance, and the Gryffindor team has the strongest lineup in these years. These days Harry and his teammates are training as hard as chicken blood. Hogwarts received 2 firebolt flying brooms at the same time. One was naturally ordered by Bai Lin for almost 3 months, and the other was a gift from Black to Harry. Bai Lin couldn't help complaining about why he doesn't have to wait 3 months for the goods. If there is one magical item that makes Bai Lin most satisfied, it must be the flying broom. It is small in size, fast in speed, flexible and convenient, and it is simply an artifact for traveling at home and killing people. The firebolt is the most well-crafted flying broom in the world. Harry excitedly took out his broom kit, but he didn't find a single thing that he needed to repair and polish. It was perfect. Imagine your buddy suddenly got a Ferrari. The Gryffindor kids went crazy trying out Harry's new broom, and the Hufflepuff kids got Bai Lin again. It was only then that Bai Lin remembered that he was still a member of Hufflepuff College, and it would be fun to let them all ride on it. Seeing the happy faces of a group of boys and girls, Bai Lin couldn't help but smile. Badger's Yard is the destination of life. Catherine exclaimed. In Bai Lin's puzzled expression, Catherine explained, Hufflepuff is not as talented as the students in the other 3 colleges, but they are all loyal, kind, and good people. Professor Dumbledore assigned you to Hufflepuff. Chi is also the highest recognition of your moral character. Bai Lin suddenly realized that he remembered the final battle in the Harry Potter story. Most of the Hufflepuff students stayed to fight the Dark Wizard to the death, and it was also the academy with the worst casualties. Although he was just an Oriental who had been reborn in the wizarding world, he still couldn't help but be in awe of this group of Hufflepuff students. The Quidditch House Cup matches quickly began to be organized, with the first match looming and the weather getting worse. The intrepid Gryffindor team had been training harder under Ms. Hooch's watchful eye, but in their final practice session before Saturday's game, Wood had some not-so-good news. Because the Slytherin team's Seeker Malfoy claimed that his hand injury was not healed, although the whole school knew that he asked for it. Although Big Buck was also released, Malfoy still disrupted the Gryffindor team's plan with this reason. Chapter 37. Gryffindor vs Hufflepuff. Although the members of the Gryffindor team were very angry, it was clear that Snape, the Dean of Slytherin, also supported their team. The bad weather these days was not conducive to the performance of the Slytherin team, who relied on tactics to win. However, even though Lupin was still on the hospital bed, the substitute teacher was not replaced by Snape, but by Bai Lin. He did not really catch a dark creature for everyone to practice like Lupin did, but spoke in a humorous way. Teach children tactical thinking and coordination. If this kind of theoretical course is taught by Professor Flitwick, the children will definitely not listen to it, but everyone likes Bai Lin very much. Defense against the dark arts class. It was very successful. I think you are very suitable to be a teacher. Catherine, who was standing outside the door to welcome the end of Get Out of Class, said to Bai Lin. The two had a big hug, and after putting down Catherine, Bai Lin greeted Harry and motioned him to come to the faculty lounge. Although the Gryffindor students were the enemies of the Hufflepuff team the next day, Bai Lin still let Harry come to the lounge of the Hufflepuff school to avoid confronting Snape, who was indistinguishable from friend and foe. So, although Bai Lin was not afraid of him at all, his main energy was still on the next day's actions. In the staff lounge, Harry saw Black, who had been reclusive for the past few days, and Lupin, who had just come down from the hospital bed. The only surprise was that the onion-nosed Auror Louter Archer was also drinking black tea in the lounge. And had a great chat with Blake, as if they forgot that they were life and death enemies a few days ago. Seeing that everyone has arrived, Bai Lin closed the door, nodded to Louter, and said, Gentlemen, today we are mainly discussing the defense and handling of some accidents tomorrow. We are honored to invite His Excellency Louter to participate in this operation. Well, I'm sorry Professor, I have a Quidditch match tomorrow. Harry said weakly. Bai Lin nodded to him with a smile and said, You can participate in the competition normally, but I need to remind you to pay attention to a few points, and I will talk about it later. Bai Lin took out a blackboard, and Catherine quickly drew a map of the Quidditch field. Bai Lin said, As you all know, I have acquired some talents through years of research. Black rolled his eyes. For example, divination. Maybe I opened my eyes like Professor Trelawney. In short, I predict that there will be some accidents tomorrow, so I need the help of gentlemen and ladies. We can show up in time and avoid accidents to the children. Injury, oh, I mean impact on the game. Bai Lin drew a few circles on several key points of the Quidditch pitch with chalk, and marked the initials of several people, saying, Tomorrow, everyone will happily watch Harry's game in this position. By the way, I shouldn't be cheering you on, I'm a member of Hufflepuff haha. Bai Lin smiled relaxedly and said, If anything unusual happens during the competition, I mean if there are Dementors who have not withdrawn from Hogwarts and don't have long eyes, everyone will disperse them as soon as possible. It's okay, as for the direction, let's drive them in the direction of the Forbidden Forest. Harry asked nervously, Will the Dementors really appear? For what? Bai Lin patted him on the shoulder with a smile, and said, Remember our special training, be fully prepared, and meet uncertain challenges. If they don't come, it's fine. If they come, I definitely want them to look good. When Harry woke up the next morning, he almost thought it was still night, with the wind blowing and the rain pouring down. He met his teammates in the banquet hall. Wood's face was solemn, but he was still very confident in the game. Of course, his confidence mainly came from Harry's new broom firebolt. And learned that Bai Lin did not lend his firebolt to the Hufflepuff team members. Quidditch is the #1 sport at Hogwarts. The teachers and students of the whole school came out to watch the game as usual. They all held big umbrellas, but they often had to prevent the umbrellas from being blown over by the strong wind. Harry and his teammates put on bright red uniforms. As usual, Wood gave everyone a burst of impassioned pre-match mobilization. Everyone held hands together, shouted slogans and walked onto the field under the heavy rain. The rain hit Harry's glasses, and he was a little troubled. How could he see the snitch clearly? Fortunately, when passing the stands, Hermione came out from the side and put a waterproof and moisture-proof on his eyes. Harry thanked Hermione gratefully, but there happened to be a thunderstorm, and Hermione didn't hear anything. The Hufflepuff players, wearing pale yellow robes, came from across the field. Hufflepuff had the largest number of students, and the applause was louder than Gryffindor at one point. After the captains on both sides shook hands, Miss Hodge motioned for everyone to get on the broomsticks, and Harry turned over and boarded the firebolt skillfully. Miss Hodge blew the whistle and the game began. Harry was drenched quickly, and felt the cold of the winter rain all over his body, but he was full of fighting spirit and full of strength. He quickly shuttled back and forth over the court, passing by red or light yellow figures from time to time, but it was still time to find the snitch, and the rain was so heavy that many players might not be able to distinguish teammates from opponents. Despite this, the Gryffindor players showed their fighting spirit and took the lead. The Hufflepuffs also demonstrated their loyalty and kindness, and despite being disadvantaged, they did not foul maliciously. Miss Hodge whistled as Wood called a timeout, and Harry and the team descended from the sky. During the descent, Bylin happened to give him an encouraging gesture, but Bylin was still wearing the Hufflepuff team robe and even a huge hat with an exaggerated image of a badger on his head, which looked playful and funny. Opposite Hagrid in the lion hat sitting in the Gryffindor stands. The players squeezed under a certain umbrella, and Harry asked, "How's the score?" "Leading them by 50 points, Wood said, "but the vision is too poor, maybe it's a bit difficult, but if Harry doesn't catch the snitch, we're afraid we'll have to race until night, and our physical strength will be exhausted a bit." Fred pursed his lips. "Hufflepuff is too conformist, we can't make free throws." He and George often use each other's fouls to make free throws. Wood said, "Don't think about free throws. We will play upright. Everyone must be prepared for a long game. I will guard the goal." Harry nodded and said, "I just got the hang of it, don't worry, I will find the snitch." Wood nodded, adjusted the formation slightly, and signaled to Miss Hodge that the game could continue. Harry rode the firebolt into the air at a rapid speed, causing cheers from the Gryffindor stands again. Black, who was standing in the back corner, waved his hands desperately, wanting to tell others, "That's my godson, that's my godson." Parents have a sense of sight. Chapter 38. Encirclement and Suppression Operation. Harry hovered in mid-air. He was waiting for the lightning, and sure enough, a thunderbolt flashed in the air, instantly lighting up the entire arena, and Harry saw a golden flash at the edge of the arena. Harry kept his eyes on the snitch, crouched on the firebolt, accelerated rapidly, and rushed towards the snitch. The two Hufflepuffs saw a flash of red, and Harry passed between them, cheering from the stands. When Harry was looking for the snitch in the air, the seeker on the opposite side was obviously staring at Harry. Following his eyes, he also found the snitch, and it was closer than Harry, but he only had a handful of comets. It was 5 or 6 years ago. The formerly popular style was economical and durable, but in terms of speed, it was not as fast as the Nimbus 2000 eliminated by Harry, let alone the Firebolt. The Hufflepuff seeker was quickly overtaken by Harry, who was so focused on accelerating that he almost ran over the edge of the stand. The Hufflepuff students were filled with righteous indignation. "You are bullying people with the equipment of a professional player." The Golden Snitch obviously also noticed Harry's approach, and flew off the field quickly. The Golden Snitch didn't have a clear concept of the playing field, and often flew outside the field. Harry's eyes were firm. There was nothing but the snitch, and he really rushed out of the field like a crossbow bolt. The Hufflepuff students watched Harry fly away, and some students turned their heads only to find a huge badger-shaped hat on the stands, and Bylin was nowhere to be seen. Harry rushed out of the playing field, and there was a small forest below. He quickly passed through the forest, but something strange happened, and Harry felt a strange silence around him. The wind, though still fierce, forgot to roar, the rain, though still dripping, forgot to make a noise, as if someone had turned off the volume, or Harry had suddenly become deaf, and Harry was dazed, wondering what happened. Then a chill that was terribly familiar came over him, penetrated him, and he became aware of something flying in the clearing below. Before he had time to think, he took his eyes away from the snitch and looked down. There were at least 20 or 30 Dementors standing in the clearing, all those hidden faces looking up at him, and Harry felt as if icy water rushed up his chest, forming ice knives and cutting his internal organs. Then Harry heard someone screaming, inside his head, a woman. He recognized the voice, it was his mother, Lily Potter. Following the sound, he saw Lily kneeling in front of a black figure and begging bitterly. "Don't touch Harry, don't touch Harry, please don't touch Harry!" Mom cried. "Get out of the way, you stupid woman! Get out of the way!" A gloomy and crazy man said. "Don't touch Harry, please, kill me! Kill me!" A lingering white mist filled Harry's mind, making him numb, but a ray of silver light lit up in his mind, and a silver stag came out of nowhere, dispelling the white mist in his mind, causing Harry to wake up instantly from the fantasy in his brain. "You guys! Don't even think about it! Knock me down!" Harry yelled, pulling out his wand and pointing it at the group of Dementors. "Guardian! Guardian!" High-end hunters often appear in the form of prey. Bai Lin's mind suddenly appeared in the words of his good brother Wang Hao in the dormitory in the university before his rebirth. Afterwards, she chattered with Bai Lin and popularized internet hotspots. But at this time, Bai Lin really felt that what he said was too true. Originally, he was a little worried that Harry would fall off the broom like in the original book. In the original book, he was not high from the ground, and the speed of the broom was not fast, but he just fell. A little skin trauma and fainted, but today he was riding a firebolt flying at high speed, and it was 30 meters above the ground, so falling down was no joke. And Harry's performance far exceeded expectations. Not only did he quickly free himself from the mental attack of the Dementors, but he also heroically launched an attack on the Dementors. With the dazzling silver light from Harry's wand, the silver light even began to slowly form an animal image, which resembled a horse but was not a horse, and gradually became clearer. It grew long and forked horns, and it was a stag. At the same time, several figures rushed out from the woods below, shouting, "Gushin Hushin! Gushin Hushin!" Black rushed to the front, his magic wand was shining with silver light. Although he did not form the form of a patron saint, he also had a faint prototype, not like his animagus. The image of a big dog, but more like Lion of Gryffindor. Lupin rushed from the other side, because he was cursed by a werewolf, he couldn't further increase the pure holy energy, and Hagrid was influenced by the blood of a giant, so they could only make his wand shine like a torch in silver, but it's also enough to make Dementors uncomfortable and frightening at close range. The patron saint of the onion-nosed Auror Lauter is a silver-white bull. The wizards who can become Aurors are all elite wizards. They are good at various defense against the dark arts. Unassuming as he was, his patroness was handsome, and rushed from above his wand, heading straight for the Dementors. A huge silver tulip bloomed directly among the Dementors. It was Catherine's patroness charm. Before her, Bai Lin had never heard of a wizard summoning a plant-shaped patroness, but her tulip was obviously the MVP of the audience, because the patroness of other people can only use the light to startle the Dementors, and then flee in all directions, but the light of the tulip is like flames or sulfuric acid, directly burning the surrounding Dementors in pain, emitting the white mist and the black and torn robes all dimmed a bit. "Drive them into the Forbidden Forest," Bai Lin set a trap for them. Catherine said loudly, although the rain was still heavy, but Catherine obviously cast a loud curse on herself, and everyone heard her words. So Harry lowered his broom, formed a half-circle with everyone, and drove the fleeing Dementors towards the direction of the Forbidden Forest. Lauter had heard that Bai Lin had killed a Dementor on the train, but he was skeptical. Countless wizards had studied Dementors for hundreds of years, but none of them had found a way to kill them. The establishment of Azkaban, a special prison, allows Dementors to torture prisoners there legally, which is considered a forced settlement between wizards and Dementors. Luo can't do anything with them. Out of a sense of justice to protect the students, Lauter was persuaded by Bai Lin to join this operation, but he was still curious in his heart, what trap did Bai Lin set? Chapter 39. Hunting in the Rain. At least 20 Dementors were driven into the Forbidden Forest. They danced in pain and rushed into the woods, only to feel far away from the influence of the patroness charm. At this time, a white werewolf led dozens of Thestrals. He and more than a dozen hippogriffs rushed out from around the Forbidden Forest, roaring and driving the Dementors deep into the Forbidden Forest. The emotions of animals are chaotic, far less delicious and easy to control than humans. Although Dementors are not afraid of these animals, they are afraid of being blocked by animals and being chased by a few vicious wizards behind. The Dementors ran away, and suddenly felt a delicious mood in front of them. On a small open space in the forbidden forest, they built a small wooden house. The wooden house was very simple, similar to a gazebo, but the rain couldn't get in. A large pot was set up in the wooden house, and the fragrant hot pot was burning hotly. A young man was happily cooking the dishes. It seemed that the delicious food brought him full satisfaction and joy. He has been thinking about what makes him the happiest. After thinking about it, it is still the most relaxing and enjoyable time to eat hot pot and sing songs with his classmates during military training. Bai Lin was holding the bowl in one hand, and holding the vegetables with the homemade chopsticks in the other. In the eyes of the Dementors, that look was simply peerless delicacy, just enough to make up for the damage caused by the Patroness curse just now. More than 20 Dementors were flying around the hut, approaching step by step. Bai Lincoln pretended not to see, humming and eating hot pot to himself. Finally, one Dementor put down its hood, revealing its dark, distorted and horrible face with no features visible. The black hole on the face let out a sinister roar. Not to be outdone, the other Dementors put down their hoods one after another, roaring. They rushed to the hut together. They didn't care about the Ministry of Magic's request, they only knew that they had just been hurt by the wizard, and now delicious food was in front of them. Just as the Dementors were about to tear Bai Lin apart, they almost squeezed in front of the hut. Bai Lin threw away the bowl and chopsticks, and shouted, "This is the moment, call God to guard." With 15, plus 50, points of magic power, Bai Lin also has the magic boosting effect of the ring, and the Patroness charm released by him is comparable to the little fights on the train. It was as if a sun had been ignited in the hut, and a giant golden owl with a wingspan of 2 or 3 meters directly split the hut into pieces, jumping up from Bai Lin's hand in an instant. This is the full form of his patron saint. God Eagle Owl. The golden light poured into the open mouths of the Dementors as if for free, and the Dementors were like people who couldn't swim with a big sip of water in their lungs, flapping their pale and rotten arms in pain. Call God Eagle Owl flapped its wings, and several Dementors were knocked down to the ground. At this time, horns sounded from the woods, and dozens of figures rushed out from the woods. Their upper bodies looked like humans, but their lower bodies were horses. It was Bane and Forenza who led his tribe of centaurs to charge. Come out! The centaurs are not without magical talents. On the contrary, their talents and accomplishments in healing spells and divination far exceed that of ordinary wizards. Their healing spells do not require magic wands, but are similar to the pure natural energy of druids. Use healing touch and rejuvenation on these monsters. Forenza shouted. The centaurs carried their bows and arrows on their backs, and quickly surrounded the Dementors that were rolling all over the ground. One by one, they found the target and cast healing spells on the Dementors. All of a sudden, these Dementors, who usually intimidate the world and are feared by everyone, are like wild boars caught in a trap, and they have become living targets for the horse people. The horseman casts spells with both hands, and the turquoise glows between the fingers, which is full of natural and life energy. For ordinary people, this energy is a precious power that heals wounds, stimulates cell activity, and even repairs organs. Armor-piercing bullets pierced through the Dementors' robes, and their seemingly solid bodies were also melted away. Some Dementors still wanted to escape. Catherine led the action team to chase in from outside the woods, Swafeng led the animals to outflank them from the other side, and stopped the fleeing Dementors. Facing a Dementor fleeing head-on, Catherine released the holy light healing technique she learned at Booth Ballon School of Magic. The energy of the healing technique exploded in front of the Dementor like a grenade. Almost the Dementor was blown up and a hole the size of a bowl was blown out, and the Dementor was severely injured. Open the seal. Bai Lin took out the ancient book summoning illustration book and pointed it at the Dementor. At this moment, the shouting eagle owl has not disappeared yet. Its huge body flew to the side of the Dementor, its long golden eagle beak pecked at the Dementor forcefully, and grabbed the Dementor's robe with one mouthful. The Dementor suddenly let out a terrified expression, screamed, and then disappeared into the air as if burned by fire, and was sealed in the illustrated book. Calling the god eagle owl non-stop, like a strong man participating in a hamburger eating contest, subduing the Dementors one after another, while Bai Lin only needs to easily lift the illustration book and activate the seal, which can be described as relaxed and happy. The centaur and the wizards of the action team have never seen such a scene. In their eyes, the day before they thought the Dementor was the most evil and most difficult monster in the world, but today they saw the Dementor turned into a bowl of Italian macaroni, was eaten by Bai Lin's patron saint one by one, and in less than 5 minutes, there were no more than 20 Dementors left. The god-calling eagle owl disappeared into the air after a contented cry, and Bai Lin looked at the hint on the illustrated book. Successfully sealed 23 Dementors and obtained 2,300 Hogwarts contribution points. Get summoned beast, Shadow Fiend, level 6. It's done, Bai Lin felt like he had won the big prize. He worked so hard from June to November, and he earned more than 6 points. This time, he made 11 points in one day, and added a new summoning beast skill. It took several days to prepare and arrange, and he used all the strength he could use. I've never seen such a powerful patron saint! Louter exclaimed with a look of envy. Bai Lin smiled, wiped the rain from his face and said, as we all know, I have acquired some talents through years of research. Black rolled his eyes again, not believing his nonsense at all. Bane and Firenze stepped forward. They didn't want to talk to human wizards, they just said goodbye to Bai Lin. Bai Lin hugged Firenze very gratefully, patted his arm. Firenze greeted Bai Lin gracefully say goodbye. Swafeng also brought the Thestrals and Hippogriff over, looking like offering a treasure and begging for praise. Harry, still wearing a red team robe, stepped forward to hug Swafeng. Bai Lin glanced at Harry, and said with a sober look in the world, although I am Hufflepuff's teacher, I still think it is necessary to remind you that your Quidditch match is not over yet. Chapter 40. The Sudden Wizard Duel. Harry hurried back to the arena to find out, because of his disappearance, the Gryffindor team panicked and was overtaken by the Hufflepuff team by 70 points. The current score is 82. Fortunately, the opponent's seeker is chasing the golden ball. The snitch was running around in the field. His comet broom was only a few dozen galleons cheap, and he could still make ends meet at ordinary times, but it was a little bit reluctant to use it to chase the golden snitch on a rainy day. Bringing Catherine along, Bai Lin, who rode back to the arena on a firebolt, felt a bit embarrassed watching the game. As Hufflepuff's teacher, he didn't help them much. Sneaking up to Hufflepuff's head, the short and chubby Professor Pomona was watching helplessly as Harry quickly caught up with their seeker. Here, Professor. Bai Lin handed Professor Pomona a small package. Pomona was taken aback, but he didn't say a few words to the new teacher transferred to his college. She took the package into her hand and saw that it was full of a small package of galleons, probably nearly 200 pieces. Forget me for sponsoring the team. To equip the young man with a new broom, at least Nimbus 2001. Bai Lin scratched his head and said. Seeing Bai Lin's arrogance, Pomona gave him a thumbs up. After thinking for a while, she took out a small gadget from her bosom and stuffed it into his hand regardless of whether Bai Lin wanted it or not, saying, Thank you. Your generosity, Mr. Kelling, and this is given to you in return. Pomona is a professor of herbal medicine, and she is in charge of the Hogwarts greenhouse by the way. The first few Harry Potter stories have been unknown, and Bai Lin has never paid attention to her, but when he got the things she handed over, Bai Lin immediately beamed with joy, because although he didn't know him, the illustrated book reminded him, if you find a magic truffle, you will get +5 strength if you eat it. I didn't expect Aunt Pomona to have such a good thing. It seems that I will communicate more with this immediate boss in the future. Up. The game ended at the whistle of Ms. Hodge. With the help of the powerful acceleration performance of the firebolt, Harry caught the snitch first. Gryffindor scored 150 points and won the game. The rain had gradually subsided, but compared to the thunderous cheers from Gryffindor, the Hufflepuff players came back dejectedly. It was really uncomfortable to watch the victory slip away from their hands. But Pomona did not blame everyone, but asked everyone to go under the big umbrella, cast a spell on everyone to dry their robes, and then announced that Professor Kellen White had donated a Lightwheel 2001 to the Hufflepuff team. The team members felt better. After all, the Firebolt is equivalent to a top sports car like Ferrari, and the Nimbus series is a more realistic dream for ordinary students. Slytherin's Seeker Malfoy uses a Nimbus 2001. While Harry and Black were celebrating their victory in the Gryffindor lounge, Bai Lin and Catherine were kissing on the Hogwarts tower. Although the plan was thorough today, they still risked their lives. Bai Lin had a feeling of narrow escape. Seek wealth and wealth. Bai Lin exclaimed. Oh, if possible, I still hope you don't take such a big risk. Catherine said with some resentment. Bai Lin scratched her cute nose and said, there will be no next time. The Dementor will only be released from the usual magic immune state when it opens its mouth. Other enemies don't need to be so troublesome. But I will still fight the Death Eaters in the future, so you don't want to participate. I feel very guilty for putting you in danger. Don't underestimate me, I'm an excellent graduate of Beauxbatons, No worse than your Hogwarts. Catherine wrinkled Bylin's lovely nose, but then said worriedly, but I have searched through the books in the library, but I still haven't found a defense against the Avada Kedavra. If it's so easy to find, it won't be the 3 forbidden spells. Bylin shrugged and said, I can only fight fast. I can read spells faster than them. I hope I can beat their wands away. Will the Death Eaters really attack Hogwarts? The mysterious man never dared to provoke Principal Dumbledore. Catherine said with some distress. The next day, there was another incident that went directly to Dumbledore's principal's office. Lupin's identity as a werewolf was still made public, and the Ministry of Magic also issued a notice that Lupin could not continue to be hired as a teaching staff. So even if the defense against the dark arts teacher was completely free, our half-blood Prince Snape was obviously determined to win, but to Dumbledore's surprise, Bylin, the assistant professor of the protection of fantastic beasts, also recommended himself to Dumbledore. Professor of Defense against the Dark Arts. The Vice Principal McGonagall and Snape have never been the same, and together with Professor Pomona expressed their support for Bylin. The two aunts had a big fight with Snape in Dumbledore's office. I have to say, the old lady in the end, Snape became angry and challenged Bylin as a wizard. The winner would be the Professor of Defense against the Dark Arts, and Bylin gladly accepted the challenge. So, during the tense House Cup Quidditch match, the students of Hogwarts ushered in an unprecedented big melon, and the two teachers were dueling for the position of professor. Ron asked Hermione weakly, is the professor of this course paid a lot? Why are you arguing about this? Hermione rolled her eyes, do you think it's a salary issue? Although someone is not a Gryffindor professor, but I think that if Snape is a professor, our Gryffindor points may be deducted this semester. Empty. As Hermione said, except for the students of Slytherin, no one wants Snape to succeed, and the happiest things are still Fred and George, who directly opened the market in the student circle, betting on who will win. Who among the Gryffindor students has not suffered from Snape's ridicule, who hasn't been detained by Snape for a small mistake, but even Neville, who is bullied by him every day, has to admit that Snape is powerful, consummate in magic, and good at almost everything. Some people even think that he may be the successor of the principal in the future. Squeezed a sweat. Except for Harry and the others, everyone had never seen Bylin make a move. They just thought that this new handsome teacher was kind and good at teaching theory. His unique magic animal summoning technique was very strange. But black magic in its defense, everyone is not optimistic about Bylin. The duel meeting was on Thursday afternoon. It was originally a defense against the dark arts class for third-year Gryffindor students, but it was temporarily adjusted to become a wizard duel practice. Even Dumbledore happily came to watch the battle and act as a referee wearing a tall wizard hat, and the students had 3 floors inside and 3 floors outside, which can be called a grand event at Hogwarts.